Okay, everybody, and good evening, Democrats! Hey, that sounded pretty good, actually, but let's just do it again. We want to get everybody on Zoom to unmute. Everybody here, let's get it nice and loud. I want to show everybody who's watching at home, you can see it, but look how many people we have here today. You seeing this? Let's go. Good evening, Democrats!
Good evening, Democrats.
Hey. All right. Welcome to everybody in here, out there. Thank you so much for coming. I hope everybody has been staying safe. I hope everybody has been out attending protests and rallies. We've had some really good ones in LA over the last few weeks. And we've got a lot to get to tonight. So from the national and international level, all the way down to here in Santa Monica, and even just within this club. So there's a lot to do. Let's get to it. But first, I want to announce next month's meeting, May 21st, right here at the Church in Ocean Park. We're going to continue our series of candidates for governor with a gubernatorial doubleheader. Betty Yee and Tony Thurmond will both be joining us next month for an hour each, back to back. Obviously, that'll all be leading up to our opportunity to endorse for governor. And later this evening, we're going to be holding our annual executive board election, and you'll hear from the new board for 2025. And also, we're kicking off our deep dive into the future of the airport. Tonight, we'll be hearing from a few community organizations, and then we're going to launch our ad hoc airport committee to study this even further and eventually make a recommendation to council. So first, we want to get right to our first guest. He needs no introduction to this club. Having represented Santa Monica in Congress for over 10 years, he now serves as the vice chair of the House Democratic Caucus. Please welcome Congressman Ted Lieu.
Okay. All right.
Okay, thanks for being here, Congressman. So, if you want to, did you have? Oh, yeah. Is it got to turn on?
Hi. Well, good evening. I strained my back. That's why I'm sitting. So on Monday, I fly to Washington, D.C., and let me just first say how excited I am to now be in front of normal, rational, kind people. So I'll give you an update from my perspective of what's been happening, and then happy to answer any questions any of you may have. So my view of what's happening is this: it's batshit crazy, right? What's happening? You've got an administration that is just brazenly taking actions that are harming the American people. They are violating the law. They are wrecking the economy. Fortunately, the American people are starting to notice. You may have seen the Pew Research report poll that came out today showing Donald Trump is at 59% disapproval, 40% approval, a 19-point margin. He was at +6 approval after inauguration. So it's a really massive flip in basically 100 days. So Leader Jeffries has put out a 10-point plan that has 3 themes based on litigation, legislation, and mobilization, and we're sort of fighting out on all fronts. I wake up every morning thinking WTF, right? When I look at stuff that's happening, it is clear we need to do more. I welcome any of your suggestions, ideas on how we can do more. Happy to talk about each of those 3 items I just mentioned as well. And I'm going to listen to what you say, and I'll consider it, and happy to answer any questions that you may have. And thank you again for having me here.
So you mentioned just now, you've been focusing on the 3-pronged strategy: legislation, litigation, mitigation.
Mobilization.
Mobilization. Okay, thank you. So I want to do a little bit of a deep dive on those 3 things. Just from your perspective, what are successful examples so far of those 3 ideas? And to show us
Yeah,
how
sure.
it's working?
So in terms of litigation, over 175 lawsuits have been filed. We're winning a majority of them. You may not necessarily read about it because, one, it's a lot of lawsuits. Some of them are quite complicated cases, and oftentimes because they happen sort of a few weeks after the fact, it doesn't hit the front pages of newspapers. But we're doing quite well in the litigation sphere. And more lawsuits will be filed. It's a huge number of different organizations that are doing this. So there's Democratic states attorneys general that are doing this. And I brought them up to DC to speak to us last month, and they are very well organized, and they're definitely on it. You've got groups like the ACLU, you have the NAACP, you've got environmental groups, you have universities, and you have just a lot of different folks who are filing, and for the most part, judges who have been appointed by both Democratic and Republican presidents have been siding against the Trump administration. In terms of legislation, we've introduced a number of bills that would stop a lot of what Trump is doing. We need 3 Republicans to join us. And so that goes to the mobilization part. We are, so in Trump's first term, you may remember this really awful member of Congress, Devin Nunes. So he never did town halls. I went to his district and did a town hall for him because he never did that. And by the way, it was fascinating because I met Democrats who had never met a Democratic elected official before at that event. So now we're doing that across America. We've actually set up a system to send Democratic members of Congress to Republican districts to do town halls for these Republicans. You may have seen recently, for example, in Tucson, there is a Republican, Juan Ciscomani. He's in a targeted swing seat. The last election, his race wasn't called till 3 weeks after the election because it was that close. There was just a town hall recently with Democratic Congressmember Greg Stanton, Cory Booker, Senator Mark Kelly, and others that were basically highlighting Juan Ciscomani's record and urging him to vote no on the Medicaid cuts that we believe are coming down pretty soon. And so we're doing things like that across the country. It's really good to see people do marches and rallies and protests. At the end of the day, a democracy relies not just on 435 members of Congress in the House, right? It relies on the people across America. So it's good to see as more and more Americans get engaged and realize this administration is completely chaotic, that they come out and have their voices heard.
Okay, thanks. So let's talk about the legislation part of it. So I guess the biggest question I have, and you're a legislator, so you would know, how do you craft legislation to limit the power of an authoritarian government that crafts its own legislation through executive order and doesn't seem to care what Congress does? Like, how can you craft a bill that would work?
So executive orders are not legislation, and you may wonder why Trump's doing all these executive orders. It's because he's really bad at passing laws. In his first term, he was really bad, and he basically got one major law through, which was the Republican tax scam that had most of the benefits go to the top 1% of Americans. So now he's doing these executive orders. The thing with the executive orders, it can be reversed by the next executive. So that's why you don't see a lot of legislation coming from the Trump administration, except for this upcoming budget that's going to be pretty devastating if it passes. It would have hundreds of billions of dollars in Medicaid cuts, as well as other cuts, primarily to fund huge tax breaks again for the top 1%. So we're trying to fight back and push back against that. We've introduced a number of bills. So I'm for example, co-author of a bill that would stop what DOGE is doing and essentially say, look, you can't do this and you can't get all the private information of Americans and so on. We need 3 Republicans to join us for it to pass the House floor.
So do you see a prospect for 3 Republicans to join you on that? Or is there any other areas where you might be able to get just enough?
Yeah, so it's possible. And as the president's approval rating keeps dropping, it gives Republicans more courage. So you may have seen, so I've been calling for Secretary of Defense Pete Hegseth to resign. this week, the first Republican member of Congress came out, Don Bacon, and said the same thing. He should resign. I think partly he was able to do that because he also sees the president's pro numbers plummeting, and he has to win his race as well in a swing seat. And so if we can continue to drive down the president's poll numbers, that gives Republicans more courage to go against the president.
Good, okay, good. So now a lot of people, this is probably the number one question that I've received. Trump's already defied court orders, including a 7-2 Supreme Court decision. So if the president just refuses to comply with judicial rulings, what mechanisms are left to rein them in at that point? And are we at that point right now, considering we know that he's not listening to the Supreme Court with regard to Abrego Garcia, right? So what's the mechanism at this point, or are we just?
So I'm going to give you my view on this. So of the over 175 lawsuits, and the ones that we're winning a majority of, the Trump administration is in fact complying with those court orders. Now they are doing what litigants do, which is they try to find loopholes, they try to interpret the court order in certain ways. So I'll give you an example. There was a court that basically said, hey, this executive order you had freezing funding to all these programs, I'm going to say, declare an injunction and say, you can't do that. You can't just freeze funding like that. So the musician said, okay. And then a couple weeks later, we're like, wait, why is the funding still frozen? So they went back to court, and the administration said, well, yeah, we froze this court order, but you know what? There's this other executive order that you didn't freeze that had also frozen funding. And so the court said, okay, look, I'm going to do that now too. So they'll do things like that. And then when the court does that, then they'll follow the court. So they'll try to do things like that. The only case I am aware of where I think some people say they were violating a court order would be, I think it was actually a 9-0 Supreme Court decision that basically said the administration has to, here's the key word, facilitate bringing back Garcia from El Salvador. What the Attorney General of the United States has said is, her interpretation of facilitate is, if El Salvador releases Garcia, we will have a plane there and flying back to the United States. So that's how they're interpreting it. So, you can say, look, they're not following the court order, but there is a dispute, on that word, and it's just how you want to interpret it. But everything else, they've largely followed the court order, or they'll do what litigants do and try to sort of find loopholes around it. But they've never sort of said, you judge why we even here, we don't have to listen to you. They've never basically said that.
But there's no interest from Chief Justice Roberts to come back and say, what I meant by facilitate is this, and you're not doing it, right?
Well, the way what happened is, so they sent it back to district court to sort of implement it, and basically what's going to happen is, if the district court disagrees with the administration's interpretation, it would then get appealed back to the Supreme Court, and then the Supreme Court would then say, this is what we mean.
Got it. Okay. Well, do you feel confident that we're going to be able to ensure equal justice and that the judiciary is operating successfully if over the next 3.5 years it's almost like the system is being infiltrated with the Trump judges that are going to believe in this type of government, right?
So my answer is I don't know. So far, the majority of the cases that we're winning have been all sorts of judges appointed by Reagan, by Bush, by Trump himself, by Obama, by Biden. So it's a wide range of judges that have been basically ruling against the Trump administration. So we'll see if that continues to hold. I think it probably will, especially if the president's approval rating keeps dropping.
Yeah, let's hope that continues. If we are able to wrest back control of democracy and elect a Democratic president after this, what do you see as the major changes needed to our constitutional system in order to enact permanent safeguards to prevent a tyrant from taking power again? And do you think that that is stuff that can be done through the regular legislative process, or do you think that something bigger like, say, a constitutional convention or some other way of, making really big structural changes?
So my colleagues elected me as vice chair of the House Democratic Caucus. One of the cool things I get to do is I get to convene people and do these monthly dinners. So at a recent dinner, I had the former legal director of the ACLU there, David Cole. He was a legal director until last year, and now he's a professor at Georgetown. And he said something interesting. He said, with abuse comes reform. So after Nixon, Democrats came in overwhelmingly and then passed some laws to try to stop what Nixon had done from happening again in the future. So I imagine that will happen. I believe we will flip the House next year, and I believe in 3 years, will happen exactly what happened last time Trump was president, is we'll get a Democratic trifecta. I believe we'll get a Democratic president, Democratic Senate, Democratic House. And then we can pass legislation to try to close all these loopholes that Trump is exploiting. So I'll give you an example. The Alien Act that he's using to try to deport people without due process basically was given to the president to deal with an invasion by a foreign military power or something similar to that. Well, the courts, at least the lower courts, have said, look, there is no invasion, there is no war with another country that would justify you invoking this act. But because there was that wiggle room, there was that discretion given to the president, Trump exploited it and is trying to do this. Same with tariffs. The president can't do this unless there's some sort of national emergency. So he makes up all these things to justify national emergency. There are now lawsuits filed. They're basically saying, look, there is no national emergency that will justify you doing what you're doing. So we'll see how the courts rule on that. But it turns out that he's using a lot of these laws where there's some discretion given to the president, and then he interprets it in ways that the American people in Congress never intended. So I think we would try to close a bunch of those loopholes. And then just something, I'll give you an example. So one of the things that my district office does and deals with this is casework. So by the way, if any of you are traveling, right, and you realize your passport's about to expire, call office, we'll help you. If you're not getting, benefits you think you should be getting from Social Security or the VA or so on, call us, we'll help you. One of the things we do work on is issues with people that are being deported, or people are detained, or folks that are in prison that have claims and this or that. Before our office can do anything, we need to get what's known as a privacy release form signature. The Privacy Act requires that. So we're running this problem now where, let's say we're trying to help someone that is in the custody of, Border Patrol, or in the custody of some other agency, and how are they going to get us their privacy release form, right? How are we even going to get them a privacy release form? And then the administration says, whoops, we can't do anything because there's no privacy release form. And we're like, well, we can't get one. We don't even know how to contact this person who's in your custody. So I'm working on legislation, which won't pass because Republicans hold the House right now, but when we do get control and so on, it will basically say, no, you've got to show this form to whoever the person is and have them affirmatively either say they want to accept congressional assistance or they don't want to accept congressional assistance, and we get that back. And then at least we'll be able to help these folks. So just stuff like that, right? Yeah.
Okay, so I have a few questions for you. In your role as vice chair of the Democratic Caucus, I think a lot of people who are Democrats are very concerned or confused about what's going on with the party and its response right now. So an obvious moment of an inflection point was the budget vote, and when you and your colleagues had a plan to go forward, and unfortunately the Senate Majority Leader and 9 of his colleagues voted to approve the Trump budget, and there's a lot of disagreement about whether that was the right thing to do. You said what I think a lot of us were thinking, that it was not the right thing to do. But I think my question isn't what you would have done if you were the Speaker, if you were the Senate Majority Leader. My question is, like, what's going on with the party, right? I mean, are you seeing a coherent strategy, or are we kind of reacting to every new thing Trump does?
So I'll answer that. I just want to say, I see Jerry Rubin here, so I just want to say two of my favorite people are Marty and Joan Rubin, and Jerry as well. Joan passed away recently, so I want to show my condolences or to her family and friends. So with regard to your question, so yes, there was a disagreement between House Democrats as well and Senator Schumer and some senators. Going forward, I don't really see that disagreement happening. So the next major thing that is going to happen is this, they call it reconciliation, and that's just a fancy term for basically the majority party being able to pass what really is something that requires, 60 votes with only a majority, because they control both the Senate and the House. So this reconciliation bill, as we understand it, they haven't put the text out, is going to have hundreds of billions of cuts to Medicaid as well as other programs to fund huge tax cuts for the super wealthy. And I believe every Democrat in both the House and Senate is opposed to that, and we're trying to stop this from happening. We need 3 Republicans in the House to join us. So that's what we're focused on. So I don't think there's disagreement sort of going forward.
So for that vote for the debt ceiling standoff, big votes like that, like, what leverage do we have going into it to protect our Democratic Party priorities?
The biggest leverage is if we stay unified, right? So if House Democrats stay unified, by the way, just so you know, on any given day in the House, not everyone is there because people get sick, people have emergencies, people miss flights, all sorts of things happen. So a 3-vote majority is just not very much. So Republicans, for example, they don't get every one of their members there, every one of their members there, and our members are there, we can defeat certain things. So if we can stay unified, it makes it harder for the Republicans to get stuff through, especially if we can flip some of them in swing seats, or some of them for ideological reasons. So for example, Tom Massey is a Republican member from Kentucky who we disagree with probably on 95% of the things, but on 5% of the things, he agrees with Democrats, and he just does not change his mind. He doesn't really care what Trump says. He doesn't care what the leadership says. He has a certain view, and he's going to follow it. He's probably one of the more principled Republican members that I know. And so if he's aligned with Democrats, for example, then they can only lose 2 more votes on any particular issue.
Okay, great. Well, good luck. I really want to see some good legislative outcomes. Okay, so Senator Chris Van Hollen, your former colleague, I think we were all so impressed seeing him actually going to El Salvador and getting results. And then he went on CNN recently, he made a headline because he said that anyone not willing to fight for the Constitution doesn't deserve to lead. I think it was seen as a sort of an attack on Governor Newsom for some of the comments he's made recently, where he was seen as leaving some of our most in need constituencies behind in subservience to Trump. So my question is, what do you think political courage looks like in this moment, to the extent that what should we as Democrats expect? What level of fight? We all want to talk about, we want to see Democrats who fight, right? So what level of fighting should we expect everybody to be going to El Salvador, right? Or is there some, what should we be looking for?
So that's a great question. Yes, I think all of us should fight. I think So in Trump's first term, I did that in Trump's first term. I'm going to do that this term. By the way, it's funny. In Trump's first term, I remember at some point I got a call from my mom, and she calls me. She says, "Is it okay you say these things about the president?" And so she was sort of coming from the mom view of safety and so on.
Right.
But yes, we should all fight. Now, Senator Van Hollen is the senator of Maryland where the person was, lived. And so it makes sense that he did that. So I wouldn't expect, or I wouldn't hold against Senator Mark Kelly of Arizona if he didn't fly to El Salvador, for example. So, but yes, but we should all fight, and we should. By the way, you may want to see. There's a recent poll that came out. Trump's immigration actions are now slightly underwater. It's not even
huge.
It's not even a political courage thing. It's just that his stuff is just not popular.
Right.
And I think we should just point that out and keep shining the light on it.
It's interesting you said that, though, because a week ago, a lot of pundits were saying we shouldn't go after him on immigration because that's the area he's popular. But then as soon as we did, that area became unpopular for him.
Yes, it's called politics, right? You can actually change people's minds.
Exactly.
You may have seen that in the same Pew poll that came out, Trump had made a number of inroads with Hispanic voters in the November election. Now it's like 25% support, 75% opposed, something along those lines. And so, look, the American people get to look at new facts and change their mind, right? And one of the ways you do that is you keep highlighting issues and you keep making arguments to American people.
Okay, perfect transition to my next question about making arguments to people. The Republicans, I think, have been very successful for decades of messaging and using their echo chamber to message their issues, even though what they're talking about is abhorrent to rational thinking people. It builds and it echoes and people listen to it. So how do Democrats build not an echo chamber, but a messaging amplification system so that we're able to get our view of things to be more widely held and make it easier for us to get our positions passed?
So that's a great question. So there's two components of this, right? One is there is the substance of the message, and then there's also how is that being delivered. So there's an interesting survey after the November elections that showed that Kamala Harris won by about 15 points, people who paid attention to the news. Unfortunately, she lost by more than that from people who didn't pay attention to the news or got the news from social media or from their cousin's friend or whatever, right? So that was what that sort of tells me is it wasn't that the substance of what Democrats were saying was bad. And in fact, you had Ruben Gallego winning Arizona, you had Elissa Slotkin winning Michigan, Jackie Rosen winning Nevada, when the top ticket lost those states. Like, how did that happen? Well, so what that survey told me is, well, okay, so people who actually look at the arguments and think about it, they generally support Democrats. It's sort of folks who aren't really paying attention, and all of a sudden they realize, wow, the grocery bill just went up 50%, and they can't afford rent, and they're super pissed off, and there's sort of a backlash to that. But it's also clear we have to engage far more on sources of communications that are not CBS or MSNBC or the nightly news or so on. So we're making a much more concerted effort now to be on social media, to interact with social media influencers. For the president's address to Congress earlier this year, House Democrats brought in 30-some social media influencers to Capitol Hill, and House Democrats basically went and met with them and did interviews and so on, and then they watched Trump's awful speech, and then we went back and did interviews with them again after that speech. And so afterwards, it turned out that more people, when you add up all these social media views and accounts, more people watched what the Democrats had done than people who had watched on the news or watched the president's speech. And so we're trying to focus on sort of the delivery mechanism of communications. And then in terms of the content, House Democrats are very focused on kitchen table issues, on reducing prices, on making sure people can afford just the ability to live, right? Whether it's rent or it's grocery prices or it's energy prices. And so that's sort of what House Democrats have been focused on.
Okay, so I wanted to ask you about the student protest situation that's going on. The Trump administration is using the issue of protest on campuses as an excuse to round up protesters and deport them. And if they're here, international students are being deported, and even they're now setting the stage for American citizens who are protesting to also be deported potentially. What are you doing? What are the Democrats doing to protect the rights to protest, political retaliation against protesters?
First of all, I think it's a violation of the First Amendment, what the administration is doing.
Definitely.
We haven't, the members of Congress and Democrats have introduced legislation that would stop this. I'm sorry for the refrain. We do need 3 Republicans to join us to get that passed. We have filed, their lawsuits have been filed as well. It is very clear to me that if you're a U.S. citizen, the government can't do anything to you because of what you say or so on at these protests. Under the law, there is some gray area as to, well, do foreign nationals have those exact same First Amendment rights? I don't really know the answer to that. I don't have enough study of that particular area of the law. I tend to think, just reading the First Amendment, it actually says, it just says Congress shall pass no law, right? Abridging freedom of speech, basically. It doesn't sort of say it only applies to, citizens and not foreign nationals. So I tend to think the First Amendment would bar the administration from doing this, but there is some gray area, which is what they're using to justify revoking visas and so on for international students. But there's litigation, so we'll see what happens with that.
Okay, this is my last question. We're going to open it up to the audience after that. As you know very well, your constituents are flooding the phone lines at your office, all your offices. We're also calling Senator Schiff and Senator Padilla. I think there's a lot of questions about, is it helpful and effective to call your colleagues outside of our district? Should we be calling swing Congress members and so forth, or is that just a waste of time? And if it is not a good use of time, what is the number one thing you would ask of, Democrats in deep blue places like Santa Monica to help you to defeat this fascist government?
So we're trying to flip the House next year. Now, I also understand that that is somewhat far away, right? But I want you to understand that in the process of doing that, it can cause change among Republicans now, right? And so if you're a Republican in a swing seat and you start to see that people are dissatisfied with what you're doing, or that your opponents all of a sudden are raising money, or they're getting issues being brought up in the press that are bad for you, that might affect how you vote, things you might say, and so on. And so just sort of understand that everything that helps us flip the House and puts pressure on Republicans in swing districts can change behavior now, even though the election is next year. So that's number one. Number two, I would urge you to consider supporting groups that are involved in litigation, right? And so look at, whatever groups you happen to like, whether it's ACLU or the NAACP or environmental group or whatever groups that are spending their time and resources trying to stop the Trump administration's harmful actions in court. They do need your help. And then making your voices heard is super amazingly helpful. I remember in Trump's first term, I was really quite deflated after he won. And then I remember seeing the Women's March. It was amazing. I've never seen that amount of people across America show up. And so two thoughts occurred to me. When I saw that, I thought, we're going to flip the house. And the second is, it sort of energized me and a lot of other Democrats across America to do even more stuff. And so it's helpful for giving courage, right, to elected officials. And it's also helpful for Republicans to see this, for the president to see this. And James Madison said in 1788 something along the lines of, I'm paraphrasing, at the end of the day, right, in a democracy, it's actually sort of the people that hold it intact. The people have to have the virtue to do this. And as we see more and more people engage and showing up at marches, rallies, protests, town halls, that's super, super helpful.
Great, thanks so much. So we'll go to the audience questions, and Susan, if you can come up and grab the mic, and I think, well, I'll just ask the people who are at home on Zoom can only hear you if you have the microphone, so just wait until the microphone comes to you. And did you have one you wanted to start with?
I do have one question, if you don't mind me asking. So you've probably checked out how terrible Tesla stock is doing. That's like one of the things that really gives me a lot of joy every day. And a lot of us have been working really hard to make sure that Elon Musk loses everything and is humiliated as much as possible. But after he leaves, he's still going to have a lot of Americans' data because of Doge, and I'm very worried about that. And obviously we want the bastards out, but like, what kind of resource do we have, or what kind of recourse do we have as Americans in the future to like put that genie back in the bottle if possible?
So when we flip the House, we're going to pass the Taxpayer Data Protection Act that would address that very issue and stop it from ever happening again.
Okay.
So we couldn't legislatively overturn Citizens United. What we can do is keep electing Democratic presidents that can then appoint
Judges.
liberal judges to
Right.
the Supreme Court.
All right, I'm going to thank you for that. I'm going to go to the next person.
Sure.
Okay. All right, Jerry, you're the congressman's favorite.
Hey, well, and vice versa. First of all, I want to thank the Santa Monica Democratic Club for doing this ongoing meetings, and I also want to thank the church in Ocean Park for graciously hosting this meeting, a great progressive church. I wanted to ask you, Congressman Lieu, Pope Francis recently passed away, and you heard his statement in contrast to Donald Trump's most egregious statement that I can't even believe was uttered from any leader of anyone, let alone the leader of our great country. What do we do to reach the religious people throughout America to get them more on the sides of the Democrats to turn things around?
So thank you for that question. In 2017, and since then, I've worked with organizations, they call themselves progressive evangelicals, basically. And what they said something interesting. They said, look, it is true that to them, abortion is a very important issue, right? So they are going to be anti-abortion. But he also said, but maybe that's issue number 8 for some folks. Maybe the most important thing they care about is the environment, or they care about helping poor people, or make sure everyone has health care. So there's a lot of issues that they're much more aligned with Democrats on. And if you can just get some more evangelical voters to vote with Democrats, that would make a pretty big difference in a number of these elections. It's interesting that it's setting aside sort of evangelicals, a lot of folks who are religious, whether you're Jewish or Muslim or Catholic or so on, have the same views as folks that aren't religious, right? They care about their rent prices or their or mortgage rates or grocery prices or energy prices. And the recent polling sort of shows that support for Trump among Catholics and other religious folks sort of has now dropped. And so it's I think, focusing on sort of issues that cut across the board, across everyone, affects not just religious voters, but also non-religious voters as well.
Okay. I'm going to be answering people in the order that we started, and I'm going to ask everyone to keep their question relatively short so we have as many people get their questions answered as possible. Okay, you, sir. I'm going to hold it.
Thank you. Congressman, one of the hallmark legislation of the Biden administration was the individual
Inflation
the
reduction.
IRA, Inflation Act. We know what the president's position is on climate change. However, the majority of the benefits coming from what's money already spent, it's been in red states. How likely is it that the GOP will save the key elements of the Inflation Reduction Act because of the benefit that's incurring in red states?
That's an interesting question. It is true there are a number of red states that have a lot of renewable projects. And you've got senators and representatives who are Republican from those states. So it is possible we could get bipartisan legislation to try to shore up the Inflation Reduction Act. And to the extent the administration is simply not following the act, there's going to be lawsuits filed to basically challenge their ability to not follow the act.
She's next, and then I'm going to go to you, and then I'm going to go to the other side, just to be fair.
Just a quick comment regarding messaging as an antidote to Republicans who do it so well. As regard, let's say, to immigration, I just think every comment about it should begin and end with Trump tanked the bipartisan immigration bill written by a conservative. And so to counteract their horrible, well-produced lies with well-produced facts seems to me to be a powerful antidote to what's going on.
Thank you. Appreciate that. It also happens to be true.
Go over here. Okay. Excuse me, sorry.
Thank you so much for being here. I really, really appreciate it. And for all the people organizing this, we need you badly, and we are very grateful to have you. I'd like for you to please speak to what the Pope wants us to be doing about Gaza, what the American people want to be done about not sending any more military over to Israel. This constituency, this community, we're broken. We're broken, and we're in pain here, and neighbors are not with neighbors, and we really need you to step up and tell us what your answer is to stopping this already, please.
Why don't we let the congressman answer?
Okay, we're having the microphone. People with the microphone are going to talk. All right.
So thank you for your question. Thank you for the folks here with the signs and for your passion, your advocacy, and for your time.
We're taking turns.
And thank you for being here. And so I hear you. My office and I have met with a number of pro-Palestinian groups, both in D.C. as well as the district office.
Please let the congressman finish. Okay.
I support humanitarian assistance to Gaza, it was because of Democrats last term that there was humanitarian assistance to Gaza. I supported the first round of the ceasefire negotiated between Israel and Hamas. Hopefully they can get to a second round. Hamas still has hostages. I urge him to release them all. That would be very helpful to ending the conflict. It is a very, very difficult situation. I understand your views, and pretty sure I do. I understand your views. I'm pretty sure I understand your views. I might not.
The person with the microphone.
I think I have a difference of opinion on some of the issues, but I do understand what you are saying. So, yeah.
Okay, are we ready for the next one?
Yeah. Yes, hi. Isabel Story, I'm the Vice President of Legislation of the club. So we know we have cabinet members that are unqualified and unfit for their jobs, and many Democrats and progressives have been calling for a concept of a people's cabinet. And it seemed like that was created. Speaker Jeffrey says we've created this war room, we're going to have the people's cabinet. But after that announcement, I haven't heard anything from them. And what I was expecting with the People's Cabinet is that there would be a corresponding Democrat to all of these awful cabinet officials, where we would hear the countervailing point of view on everything they did. Like if Marco Rubio did something, the People's Cabinet, Secretary of Defense would say, well, this is really what should be happening, or this is why what's happening now is wrong, and so on. It's a model that was created in England, and the opposition party used it very successfully. So now apparently we've created this People's Cabinet, and Jeffries also calls it the War Room. But all I see now is fundraising appeals, like, we created this, give us money. But I haven't heard anything from them. Are you aware of it, and do you know what they're doing? And most importantly to me, I would love to hear messaging from them every day, and I have not heard anything.
So I don't really know much about the People's Cabinet. I will look into it, and we will get back to you. What I do know, since you brought up Marco Rubio, the ranking member of the Foreign Affairs Committee, Greg Meeks, I always have to know this because I'm on the Foreign Affairs Committee, is we have been doing our own shadow hearings. And so, for example, last month we did one on basically when the administration went ahead and essentially got rid of USAID, which I believe is illegal as well. Lawsuits are happening on that. We did a shadow hearing with USAID employees talking about the importance of USAID and also how horribly they were treated and so on. The thing is, with the shadow hearing, you're probably not going to get the CBS Nightly News to cover it. We're working on that. We're going to try to do more and see if we can get more coverage. So we are trying to do that at the committees level, but let me look into the People's Cabinet and I'll get back to you.
Great.
Sure.
Okay.
Hello. First, I want to thank you so much for going into Republican areas where they're not holding town halls. I'm from Dan Newhouse's district, and he's not holding town halls, and the progressives there are fighting back as much as they can. My question is, with that context, in light of Bernie and AOC going into these red areas and you doing stuff like that, is there a long game plan to engage these people? Because I'm from a red area.
Engage what?
Rural progressives that are been completely ignored by the DNC for decades. I mean, I'm from there. I know there are progressives there, and they never come. And there's progressive power in red areas, as we're seeing with this Bernie AOC tour. And I'm wondering if there's, in tandem with what you said, where you're going into red areas and holding town halls, is there a long game plan to keep this engagement? Because I think there's a lot of power there going forward.
So thank you for your question. I have advocated for that for many years. I was, a number of years ago, I was at this interesting panel discussion with an author that wrote a book about rural America. And she said something interesting. She said, when you look at elections, it is true that rural voters tend to vote Republican. But she said, about 30% vote Democrat without you doing anything, which is sort of interesting, right? And she said, if you would just spend time and show up in these places, you could probably change that number significantly. And so I've been advocating for that. I do know our House members will do that. I think it's one reason we actually picked up 2 seats last term in a very difficult national environment, because our House members have rural districts go out to the rural areas quite a bit. And so I don't know why the national folks didn't do that as much. I'd urged them to do so. And so hopefully this time they'll start changing and we can, we don't have to win rural areas. We just have to lose them by less. And that would be a game changer. And so that requires showing up and listening to the people in rural areas about their concerns and their issues and how we can help address those issues. And yes.
I'm sorry, just so if it's helpful to know, because of the way the churches are structured in rural areas and their messaging to each other, if you hit a church network in a rural area, that spreads because of how church in rural America is like the social structure and the social services structure, because those areas are so poor. I mean, they're the food banks, they're the childcare services, sometimes they're the places where you learn to read. So it may seem like, oh, it's just this area, but it is a network, which is how the far right got so much power, because they know this. So that's why they're there, because they know it's an entire spider web of a network. Does that make sense? Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt.
It is. No, that's very helpful to know. I appreciate that. By the way, the same author was interesting at this panel. She also said, so communications is, as you noticed, somewhat different. So if you're in New York City, right, and you see these masses of people and they're like walking and doing this or that, they're not talking to each other, right? There's massive people crossing the street or riding somewhere, this or that. But just in a rural area, like you go to a gas station, you talk to the person behind the counter and you have a conversation, and then they then have a conversation with the next person that comes in, and it turns out that a lot of information gets communicated. It's just a little bit slower, but a lot of people, in fact, will get this communication because of the way people talk a lot more with each other in rural areas in a way that in big cities they don't. But that does require sort of showing up and actually talking to people, right? And showing up early and earlier to get that done. So I'm with you, and we have a new DNC chair, so I'll talk to him about that. He also is from a state that has a bunch of rural areas, so I think he'll get it. So I'll talk to him about that.
Ken Martin. Okay, we got the next question.
Thank you. Hi, I need the mic. I'm not going to run away with it.
It's the way we do it.
Well, she's holding the mic, and she might run away with it. But talk about we're Democrats and rah-rah Democrats, and as Democrats, the state voted for the Coastal Commission. Locally, also, we voted for the airport to become a park. I'll get right to that, to the park. I would hope that we would get some federal assistance, because the city doesn't, from what I understand, have the moolah, the money to maintain it. It could be a state park. It's a regional area. Of course, we're losing because of the high-rise developments that are coming in, which won't have any front yards or backyards for recreation, where there'll be ever more demand for parks. Now, getting back to the democratically state-elected people elected for the Coastal Commission, and our Trumpian governor canceled it out, like, as you're mentioning, Trump does. Canceled out our democratically elected Coastal Commission to protect and reserve the coastal lands, which for the public. He canceled that out for the Coastal Commission's regulatory on that issue. I haven't heard you speak out. Maybe you can speak out now on that. And also, of course, the fire-prone hazard areas of the Malibu Mountains. It's the same issue. These areas are prone and have been for the last 100 years, about 34 fires throughout Malibu. It's going to continue. It has just continues to happen. So I wonder if you would take a stand on preserving these lands and ocean areas, particularly the coastline, for the public, as that was the job of the Coastal Commission, and again negated by our sagacious governor.
So that for your question, I haven't followed the Coastal Commission issue, or maybe someone else can explain this. What do you mean the governor canceled it out? The Coastal Commission is still there, right? Did he? What exactly did he do? I'm trying to understand what it is that he. Yeah. Well, just tell me.
I'll talk. Thank you. I'll brief. He wants me brief. Is it on? Okay. He canceled out the Coastal Commission was democratically elected to save the land, particularly the shoreline for the public if the housing was taken out, destroyed by the ocean or a hazard. That was by the public.
We have a person who's actually an expert on this. If you'd like to hear him talk about it, would you like?
He wants me to tell him.
Oh, okay. Can we hear from Ellis Raskin? He's a land use attorney on the city council. All right.
Let me finish. The governor canceled it out. I got to talk.
Hi, folks. Ellis Raskin, Santa Monica City Council. I'll just keep this very brief. The Coastal Commission has been doing a lot of important work recently. However, when the governor issued an emergency order in response to the fires that affected the Pacific Palisades, one of the things that was included in that order was a provision that new construction, or not new construction, but replacement construction for homes that were damaged by the fires did not have to comply with coastal permitting requirements. So I think that that's generally what you're referring to. However, this is a much more complicated issue. That's the very brief nutshell summary. I think perhaps we should get back to
just a quick question. So it's only for that one area, only for homes that were destroyed by the fire? Or is it across the entire coast of California?
No, if you're rebuilding a home that was in a fire-affected area, you don't have to get a coastal development permit.
I got it. Okay. So I'll look into that
Thanks,
issue.
Ellis.
Thank you for raising it to me, and I'll get back to you. I honestly don't know what I think of it, so let me just look into it and do some due diligence, and then I'll get back to you.
Okay, we've got a question from Stacy over here.
Hi, thank you for being here tonight. In terms of citizens' resistance, I think we all saw the biggest numbers of people coming out with the Fighting Oligarchy tour, as you mentioned. And I wonder how you and perhaps other Democrats feel about joining forces with them and saying, look, the Democratic Party is a big tent. We might not agree on everything, but we all agree on fighting what's going on in Washington right now and not letting them own that. Let's have it be all of our story.
So joining forces with whom again?
With Sanders and Ocasio-Cortez and that Fighting Oligarchy tour that was there were 35,000 people.
I totally support what they do. Oh, absolutely.
No, but not support it. Let's be there with them. How come none of the other Democratic representatives were there? Are you not invited by them, or what's the story? No, I want to know.
Okay.
Try figure out the most tactful way to say this. So, for example, first of all, what they're doing is amazing. So they had gone to Denver. It was terrific. I had heard from some of the members there some of the Congress members there saying they did not know, right? They were not sort of, maybe invited is a bit, I mean, everyone's invited, but I don't think they were invited to speak, for example. Now, at other ones, you have seen Democratic members of Congress show up, and some have spoken, some have not. So I don't know how they're doing it. So it's something you would have to ask them. But I fully support what they're doing. I think it's great.
We've got Craig back here, longtime Santa Monica Dem Club member.
Yeah, let me start by saying Kamala Harris was considered to be a DEI hire. And when we look at Project 2025, what they wanted to do was eliminate the Department of Education. The person who was secretary applauded the idea that a steak sauce would be taught elementary through high school. Harvard's fighting back. And so I'm wondering specifically, what can we see from Congress to more or less address those types of programs that are being cut and are harmed by someone who has no sense of what he's doing, who appoints people who don't know what they're doing, and we suffer. What can we expect, in the way of fighting back from Congress on those specific issues?
Thank you.
So thank you. So first of all, I agree with you. And on a Harvard issue, I wholly support what Harvard is doing. And you've seen what happens when you fight back against a bully. The bully backs down. And you may have seen the administration said, oops, we never meant to send that letter to Harvard. They wouldn't have done that if Harvard didn't fight back, right? And now you see a whole bunch of universities fighting back, which is great. You saw some law firms that made some deals with the Trump administration. And now you see a whole bunch of other law firms fighting back. And now you have some of the initial law firms that did these deals saying, whoa, we didn't mean to do this, and the way you're interpreting it is completely wrong. And so fighting back is super important, and you'll see, I think, the administration back down because people do show resistance and fight back. So the Senate, right, to do things in the Senate, most of the time you need a clear filibuster, which means most of the time Democrats in the Senate can stop things. The House is a very majoritarian institution. And so if Republicans have 50% plus one of the votes, they're going to pass what it is they want to pass. And then for Democratic House members to pass a law, we would need to get 50% plus one of the votes, which means either getting Republicans to join us or hoping there's a day where we're all there and a bunch of them are not. So one of those two things could happen.
Thank you. Henry,
we have time for about one more question.
All right. Do you think we can do a speed round? Would it be okay if we did a speed round? Because these guys have been waiting, and I know that this guy with the glasses has been flagging me down. So would it be okay if we did a speed round?
Sure.
Okay, we're going to do a speed round.
My question's quick. What kind of pressure are the elected officials in Washington putting on corporate America? They fell in line pretty quickly with the Trump agenda, and I just wonder what kind of conversations are happening with corporate leaders to, walk away from what Trump is doing because it's hurting them with tariffs and other things like that.
Thank you. All right. Should I have everyone ask their questions and then you can answer fast, or do you want to answer and then ask?
I can just answer that very quickly.
Okay.
So the tariffs are turning a number of businesses, both large and small, against the administration. I just talked to a small business today. They make plush toys. And it turns out that, the plush toys are made in China and they sell in the US. And from paying sort of nothing, a few $100s to get the items in, all of a sudden this person now has to pay like $40,000 and come up with the money, or else, they don't get that shipment of plush toys. And then I asked the question, could you make it in the US? And she said, well, you can't even get the material in the U.S. So you'd still have to import it from China, and so it sort of defeat the purpose anyway. So a lot of these tariffs are just stupid because you can't even do the thing the administration is saying they want you to do, which is to try to make this stuff in the U.S. And even if you did make it in the U.S., it would be monumentally so much more expensive that no one would buy that plush toy. And so this is just a small business. And then you have large businesses that are just sort of getting crushed with these tariffs. And so I do think you're going to see businesses start to also push back against administration.
Okay, Mike, quick question.
I'll make it quick, Ted. What do you see, if anything, that Democrats need to do on substance in terms of what we prioritize going forward so that for the 20% or 15% or whatever it is in the middle will be more permanently on our side, so we're not going to just get rid of Trump in 4 years and then 4 years after that potentially have him back, or the equivalent?
First of all, thank you, Mike, for your service to the Dem Club, and your wife was a super awesome mayor, so thank you for that as well. So in the short term, I think trying to put as much pressure as possible on Republicans to not vote for the Medicaid cuts would be very helpful. That would be super harmful to America if hundreds of billions of dollars were cut from Medicaid. By the way, 2/3 of nursing home patients rely on Medicaid. So it affects so many different layers of society. In the long term, I still think economic issues matter a lot to people. So most folks don't pay attention to politics, right? People are busy, they have their lives to lead. And then when they start noticing that they cannot afford to live, they get super angry. And they're going to blame it on whatever party they believe is responsible for that. And I think that's partly what you saw happen last year. You see that happen worldwide as well. And so trying to work on policies that help people who are just living paycheck by paycheck, I think the party that can best help those people stands the better chance of basically winning the majority and staying in the majority.
Okay, thank you. Last question.
Congressman, we've heard talk about rural communities and people who are Democrats never meeting an elected Democrat. I want to ask you a question and ask you a favor. One, did you think the 50-state strategy worked? And two, if you do, can you please put a word in with your pal, the chair of the DCCC, to invest a little money in the odd number years so we can build up some activists on the ground?
Thank you.
So yes, I support a 50-state strategy because my view of politics is everything seems impossible until it happens. So you just don't know. And I'll give you an example. In 2018, Kendra Horn won a congressional seat in Oklahoma. It was not on anyone's radar. The DCCC wasn't aware of this race. I wasn't aware of this race. Nobody was aware of this race. And on election night, we're like, oh, we just got another Democratic member. So you just really don't know what the voters may be thinking in any particular congressional district. So I fully support basically fighting everywhere. And, you know, politics, right, is changing people's minds. And people's minds can change. And if you never make that effort, then you're never going to, you know, get those people's minds to change. I'm sorry, what? Yes, no, absolutely. I'll talk to, yes, absolutely.
Thank you so much, Congressman Ted Lieu. Thank you.
Thank you for your time today. Appreciate it. Have a great evening. Oh, and thank you, John, for your leadership. Really appreciate it. Thank you.
Is there any way the Democrats could get their message out like the Republicans do?
That's what I asked.
Although they lie all the time. Is there any way you could find a way to get them to get their message out loud and clear and truthfully, unlike the Republicans who just lie 24/7?
So we're working on it. Let me here's the best way to say it. So every week we will put out, these are the 3 top line messages we would like, for example, Democratic House members to work on. So when you do that to 215 members of the House Democrats, many will do that, but some might want to talk about their local bridge project, right? Some might want to talk about their legislation on health care. Some might want to, talk about something else. So it is not super easy, right, to herd 215 cats, but we try, and we do make an effort to say every week this is what we should focus on. And then on top of that, there's a difference. So if you read our press releases, you'd be super impressed. But there's a difference, right, between that and what you see on a nightly news, because there's sort of a intermediary known as the press. So they could choose to ask you about something totally different. They could choose to misconstrue your press release. They could choose to ignore your press release and ask you about Secretary of Defense Pete Hegseth, right? So there's all these things going on, but we're trying. We're trying to get people more focused. And right now, it's very focused on trying to stop the Medicaid cuts. So that's sort of the singular message we're trying to focus on. Yeah.
That's okay.
Yeah. Oh, no problem. Thank you. Have a good evening.
Thank you so much, Congressman Lieu. And how many congressional Q&As have you been to where there's an encore like that? That was pretty cool. Okay, so in a few minutes, we're going to start our discussion about the future of the Santa Monica Airport. But first, we have a very important business, our annual Santa Monica Democratic Club Executive Board election. The Executive Board of this club obviously meets 12 other times per year aside from these meetings to plan everything that we're doing. And as those who are on the board can attest, like today, there is a lot of emails that go out in between those meetings. There's a lot of stuff going on, a lot of different departments and committees in the club. You're going to hear about some of them tonight. The election is going to be a little bit anticlimactic this year because we had exactly as many people interested in joining the board as there were vacancies. So we're going to be just confirming the board tonight, but we still want to take the opportunity to hear from the candidates. And also, if you're interested in serving on the board and you feel like you missed your chance or the club didn't let you know about it in enough time, we have plenty of vacancies at all times. People come and go and they have to leave for various reasons. Next year, we're going to have more spots. So if you're interested in being on the board, just let me know. And I'm looking around at 1 or 2 people here who actually have done that, and they'll be, first in line when we start thinking about who will be on the board next year. So just please speak up, and we'll put you to work now, and we'll put you on the board when the opportunity comes up. So now we're going to hear from each candidate running to join the board for 1 minute. At the end, we'll ask for a motion to approve the board by acclamation. And I'll start as the candidate for club president. I've been your president for 8 years under 2 very different presidential administrations. I'm proud of how we've built up the club, this organization, into a regional powerhouse during that time. We fought back against Trump and beat him, and now we're going to do it again. We flipped the House, and now we're going to do it again. We flipped the city council, and now we're going to fight to keep it progressive. There's 2 types of Democrats right now. We talked about it with the congressman, those who are ready to fight fascism and those who are ready to capitulate. And I promise to this club right now, I will never bend the knee to these people. Some of you saw me last fall getting kicked out of the city council meeting, so you know that I mean it. I will spend all of my efforts fighting for our people and fighting for a stronger Democratic Party. Now we're going to hear from we're going in a specific order of the club officers, so we'll now hear from our candidate for Vice President of Political Action, Sean Kaloji.
I didn't realize I'd have to speak. But wow, I have to say I'm very impressed by Santa Monica Dem Club attendance at this meeting. Really impressive. I live in Santa Monica. I've lived here for probably about 7 years in the Wilmot area. I've been somewhat active, kind of helped canvass in the last election, and I've been involved with Stonewall Democratic Club. I was endorsements chair for a couple of years, and part of that, communications chair. So I thought I'd kind of do more in the local community. I'm excited to kind of work with John and the board on kind of advancing kind of the ball on our issues on, obviously we have upcoming city council elections. We have some important state legislature elections that are going to affect us all, and making sure that we kind of hear things out and we get represented effectively on those levels, and also kind of that we continue to push our representatives in Sacramento and Congress to kind of fight and to kind of stand up for our values. And that's what I'd like to do. So I'd like to get to know folks better that haven't gotten to know me. Feel free to reach out. And I'm excited to get more involved in politics in my local area. Thank you.
Okay, next up we'll hear from our membership VP, Mike Soloff.
Hi, all. I joined the club in 2014. It's hard to believe, but back then we had President Obama. And a lot of people in my generation, I don't think I was alone, foolishly thought we had won. We had lived through the civil rights revolution, the women's rights revolution, LGBTQIA plus revolution, and we thought that we'd gotten there, and boy, were we wrong. And so what we learned is that the person who said that the price of liberty is eternal vigilance really knew what they were talking about. So in 2018, we went back to flipping the house, and we succeeded in that, and we, got President Biden elected in 2020, and while I didn't think we had won, at least we seemed to be stabilized, but now we're in absolute crisis mode. So for me, personally, fighting fascism is the #1 thing right now, but I think connected to that is what I was hinting at in my question. I do think the Democratic Party, and this is something I've been saying for years for people who know me in this club, needs to be doing a lot more for lower income people, people in the middle. I knocked doors for 19 days in Pennsylvania this election. Didn't work. But talked to a lot of people, and I made the best case I could, but there's no question we need to be more focused on that. So stepping back, as membership, right now the Democratic Party brand is a little bit trashed, but we need to make sure people understand. Somebody asked about Citizens United. There's nothing we can do about that unless we change the Supreme Court. We can't change the Supreme Court unless we elect Democratic presidents, a Democratic Senate, maybe we can pack the court, whatever it's going to be. We need to explain to people that whatever anger they have against the Democratic Party, they need to support it as the only realistic hope we have of reversing this. And then we also have to make sure the Democratic Party is a better Democratic Party that does that. So I'm hoping that all of you will talk to people you know and encourage them to join this club, and through this club, we will get them connected to the Westside Democratic headquarters, to our legislative committee, to protests. There's a lot of action to be done, and I think this club can help get people there. And when you tell them what we do, I think they'll be excited to get back with the Democratic Party. So please help me with that this year.
Okay, next up, we've got another new name joining the board, Michelle Grant for Vice President of Programs.
Thanks, everyone. Hi, everyone. I'm Michelle Grant, and I've been a proud resident of Santa Monica I'm in my 29th year. Just love it here. I've been very active on the national level, organizing and volunteering, but I really needed to come home and do some work here now. I'm very excited I've been a member of the club over 9 years, but this is the first time I'm going to ask for your vote for the board. I had called John with everything going on and said, put me in, coach. Where do you need me? So I'm here to work on programming. We have an exciting slate of people coming up and more to book, and I'm open to any ideas, so please shoot me an email or talk to me after and let me know who you'd like to see here. But we have a primary next June. It's only 14 months. We want to get everybody here. Governors, lieutenant governors, anyone who's running should come and seek the endorsement of this spectacular club. So thank you very much.
Okay, next up for VP of Communications, we have Philippe Nazal. Is Philippe here? Hey, there he is. I didn't see you. Come on up, man.
Hello, my name is Philippe Nazal. I also did not know I was going to be speaking up here today. So I am 16 years old and I am a sophomore at Neuro School. Oh yeah, sorry. As a candidate of VP of Communications, I believe that the number one thing that the Democratic Party should be doing at the moment is spreading the messages that we have and the ideas that we want to share with a disillusioned America with the troubles that we are facing currently. With Democrats, we're able to take the punches that are being hurled at us at the moment, and through ideas such as affordable housing that President John has been providing, I believe that if we're able to communicate our ideas throughout not just LA, but through America, we can be able to reassert ourselves back into national politics and beat back Donald Trump. Thank you so much.
Now, I don't think Keith Coleman's not on the line, is he? I know he was traveling, but you have, yeah. Okay, so Susan will speak for Keith Coleman. Yeah, great. This is for the Diversity and Inclusion Committee that she's the chair of.
Okay, I don't know if you all know who Keith Coleman is, but he's a wonderful resident of Santa Monica and a father, and he's been a member of the school board in the past. He says, as you know, I embrace collective leadership and commitment to policy and innovation that benefits humanity, healthcare, education, arts, environment, clean energy, and sustainable economic development. I invite folks to join SMDC in advancing policy for good. He's traveling tonight. He asked me to say that.
Next up, we've got our VP of Legislation, a well-known face in this room, Isabel Story.
Hi, everybody. Well, I've been a member of the club for about 8 years and the VP of Legislation for 3 years. And I was just looking back to see, and during that time, we have adopted positions on about 100 state and federal bills and advocated for them with the California legislature and with Congress. This year, we've endorsed 30 state bills and half a dozen of the most destructive federal bills. At the state level, the bills we're advocating for are on a variety of subjects, but they support affordable housing, health care, protecting Social Security and our democracy, promoting clean energy growth, protecting our immigrant population, particularly in sensitive areas like churches and schools, and lifting up marginalized people. While the current administration hacks away at our rights and services, We're fortunate in California to be able to advocate for changes to make life better for our residents and push back against the odious attacks from the executive branch. So, as the legislative VP, I plan to keep up the fight, advocating for positive change in California and pushing back against the attacks from the current administration. If you're interested in legislation, come and talk to me. We're working on these bills. Most of the time we're supporting bills, but sometimes we're very strongly opposing the bad ones. Thank you.
Okay, next up we have our new incoming treasurer candidate, Marcy Leibovitz.
Hi, I'm Marcy Leibovitz. I am standing for the treasurer job. I'm a CPA, so everyone always puts me in that job. No, I am not looking for new clients. So just part of the reason I can do this is because I am trying to scale my work back. It's always a lot, but I've always been interested and involved as I can be in democratic politics from high school forward, and believe in the progressive goals of the Democratic Party and moving our country forward and having rights for everyone. Thank you.
Okay, next up, our recording secretary, Lynn Servini.
Hi, my name is Lynn, and I've been your interim recording secretary ever since Natalia resigned when she was elected to the city council. And my job is to take the minutes at the board in the membership meeting. So you'll see me typing with my laptop, taking notes. And I also use an AI platform called Fathom.video that helps to make sure my type notes are accurate. And it records, it transcribes, and summarizes. I can even ask it to give me more details about what anybody says. I can actually ask it any question, and it will give me an answer. So it's pretty amazing. By combining this technology with my own writing and editing skills, I'm able to produce clear and precise minutes for our club. So I hope you'll vote for me.
Okay, now we are going to hear from 3 at-large candidates, and Nate, there may be a couple of them appearing on Zoom, so just you might have to full screen a couple faces. We're going to start with the longest serving member of the board who's been on since we don't even know, she doesn't know, nobody knows how long she's been on the board. Ladies and gentlemen, Patricia Hoffman.
Hi, I do know, John, that I've been on probably since before you were born. I came on at some time in the mid-'80s. And I've been a social and economic justice activist pretty much all of my life. I believe that food, housing, healthcare, and education are human rights and not privileges. I support people who support those causes and believe the same things as I. And I would like to keep serving as an at-large member of the board of this club.
Thank you. And one of your many roles in the club is that you've been the designated survivor, so to speak. She's been running the Zoom side of things remotely to let us know when the sound isn't working or something like that. So thank you, Patricia. And next up is Susan Shu.
Hi, everyone. When I'm not the Mike Nazi, I used to be the VP of Communications, so I'll have a conversation with you about all the passwords and everything for all the things. I have a background as a professional writer and a former epidemiologist, and what brought me into progressive and democratic activism was caring a lot about reproductive rights and women's rights and the economic justice of those things. And I think probably the thing that really pushed me into it was domestic violence, not experiencing it, but witnessing it. So I always view what I do through the lens of that. And when I was always very busy. I've lived in Santa Monica for a long time. I'm from Wisconsin, but I had kids go through the Santa Monica school system, and I think this is an excellent community, a wonderful place to raise kids and to be a grown-up. But after Trump won, this was the club that I came to because I just didn't really know what to do with myself, and I thought there must be a Dem club in Santa Monica. So I went here, and it's always been a very safe haven where I've learned a lot about how the rubber meets the road with national policy, state policy, and local policy, and how it matters very much who you elect and whether you have accountability from them and a through line of communication. So I would like to move into the at-large position because I don't really have the bandwidth to do, I wasn't doing a very good job at the end because I got elected to, I'm one of the officers of the LA County Democratic Party, so I'm really busy taking the notes at those meetings and doing a lot of things for the whole 3 million Democrats in Los Angeles County. But I hope I'll get your vote, and I hope I get to meet all of you and bring your friends. This is a great club.
And now, last but certainly not least, Dolly Sloan.
Good evening, everybody. As those of us who've been around a while know, that I come from 4 generations of active Democrats who have done everything from going door to door, to doing all the things you can imagine that Democrats do in a variety of states. And one of my major efforts right now in the club is that I've helped initiate an action with the church in Ocean Park and other people to set up specific protections and ways that we can give shelter and support to threatened immigrants, given what is happening to them today. So that is where my strong point is new programs that have to do with old issues where the Democratic Party can be of great support. I also think that my main other skill is getting out the vote. Remember, we may care a lot about issues, but if we don't win elections, it's all over. So that's where I put my highest skill, is triaging. It's knowing where to send people out. In my own neighborhood, for example, I know every Democrat, which I'm following in the tradition of my father, who knew every Democrat. And that got him a patronage job in the Democratic Party. Here, it gets me great joy because I know my neighbors. So thank you very much for giving me this opportunity to talk with you.
And there's one other person who will be on the board, which is DNC member Derek Devermont, who's an incumbent. He's been on the board for almost as long as me, about 7 years or so. And he unfortunately has some family issues he's dealing with, so he couldn't make it tonight, but he's going to be coming back as an at-large member next year. We'll be appointing him at our next executive board meeting, assuming everything goes well now. So thank you to everybody we just heard from for stepping up to help lead this organization. Obviously, one person can't do it by themselves. It takes at least 12 people to really pull all these meetings together and all the other stuff we do outside of the meetings. So thank you to everybody who we just heard from. Also want to thank Sam Cozzolino and Luis Castagnone, who are stepping down from the board. So Luis, for those who don't know, Luis is our newest member of the College Board, and that's why he's stepping down, because he just got appointed to fill Barry Snell's seat. And Sam Cozzolino wanted to be here. We'll have him come back next month. He wanted to say goodbye, but he was our board member who is also a student at New Roads, and he's graduating and going to college, and so he won't be in town anymore. But the good news about Philippe is it's Sam's handpicked successor, so we have very high hopes to continue that spirit. So, that being said, is there a motion to approve this new executive board for 2025? I saw Jerry's hand go up first. Is there a second? I saw Albie. Okay, so that's the first and second. All in favor, say aye. 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 All opposed? Oh, we had a dog voting. I'm not sure if they're a member. Okay, all opposed? Any abstentions? Okay, so be it. Congratulations, everybody. Okay, so we're about to go to I know everyone's very excited. I'm excited about the airport presentation. We have a very quick presentation from our legislative committee, just a couple of bills. Isabel, come up, let's do that. And don't worry, it's gonna, okay, Isabel.
Okay. Yes, I know it's a long evening and people are looking forward to airport talk, so I will make it quick, but it's important. So our legislative committee has approved 5 new bills, and so has the board. So now I'm bringing it for the membership vote to take a position on these 4 bills. So one of them is AB 648. It's by our Assembly member Rick Sabur, and it's basically to allow community colleges to build housing for their students and staff. We know we have a terrible problem at the college with students experiencing homelessness and some of them sleeping in their cars. And this, right now, UCs and state colleges are able to build housing. This would allow community college, and it is to do the same. And this bill is actually sponsored by Santa Monica College. And it's been brought to us by 2 members of the College Board who are members of this club, Luis Castagnone and Dr. Shai Roy. Another bill is SB 7. This was brought to us by one of our members, Dina Inglesrud, who is our expert on AI. It's known as No Robo Bosses. I was really surprised to learn about some of this, but apparently AI is being used extensively now to monitor employees and their work, and sometimes even fire them if they're not moving quickly enough. So basically, this bill would make it mandatory that any decision about hiring, firing, discipline, and so on would have to involve a human being. You couldn't just be monitored by an AI, fired by an AI with no human intervention at all, which actually has been happening. People get their notice that they're fired from the AI system with never a person involved. So this would bar that there would have to be a human being involved in any decision like that. The third bill is AB 942. This has to do with net energy metering. This would be to oppose it. For anyone who either has rooftop solar or understands the importance of having solar power for our clean energy future, you will want to be opposed to this, because this bill would slash the credits that have been given to people with rooftop solar and impose a new solar tax. So when people put in their solar panels, they sign agreements with the state that said that they would get these special rates for 20 years. And the idea behind that is that these panels are very expensive, and so that you would get this energy credit for 20 years, at which point you would about break even. So people who were trying to do right by the environment and would have their costs offset. So this would break the agreement with more than 2 million solar customers and cut their credits from 20 years to just 10 years, and on top of that, settle them with a solar tax. So this would be really detrimental to rooftop solar and our clean energy future, so we are opposing this bill. And the last one is AB 246. This is to protect the recipients of Social Security. We actually supported a bill, AB 246, that was on a completely different subject. It's a little technical, but something called gut and amend happened, which they just completely wiped out the contents of this bill and replaced it with something else. So our committee looked at, well, what's the new bill? And we decided, yes, we want to support this. And it's basically, if Social Security benefits are interrupted, which we've heard a lot of talk about could happen because of all the layoffs and cuts and incursions into the computer systems. If that happens and someone cannot pay their rent due to not getting their Social Security check, they could not be evicted due to that. So it's to protect the Social Security recipients in case they can't pay their rent. For that reason, they could not be evicted. So those are the 4 bills. I'm presenting this as a consent calendar, so we could vote on them all at once. But we always do allow, if you have questions about a certain bill or want to discuss it, you can pull the bill and we can vote on it separately. Craig, do you have a question or do you want to pull the bill? Yes. So right now, that's not part of this bill. The bill, right now, that community colleges are prohibited from building housing. So this bill would just allow them to do it, but it would not actually create housing or entail any cost. It would just allow them to even have a plan or even, and I'll tell you the background to it was that Santa Monica College, because they didn't have the power to do this, was going to work with UCLA to build some housing, and then UCLA pulled out of it. So they were left high and dry, and they went to Rick Zabur and said, you know, what can we do? So this is just one step. This is just to give them the power to be able to do it. Okay. If there are no other questions, then, excuse me? I don't know all the details about that. I would imagine funding, but I don't know what happened there. Okay. Seeing no other questions, is there a motion to adopt the suggested positions on these 4 bills? Craig moved, and you are? Marcy? Marcy, okay. And Marcy seconded? Okay. Raise your hand if you are in favor of the positions on these bills. Do we have to count, John, or can we just see like about how many? Okay, lower your hands. Yeah, let's just, is anyone voting no? Okay, we have 1 no vote. Any no votes on the Zoom? Okay, anybody abstaining? 1, 2 in the room. 2 in the room. Any on Zoom? 2 abstain. All right, the motion passes. Thank you very much. Your committee will get to work on these bills.
Thank you so much, Isabel. Thanks to the Legislative Committee. We're glad we're able to continue to do that advocacy. Okay, let's get to the airport discussion. Now, this club, obviously, it's been a long time, but we endorsed Measure LC back in 2014 as part of the coalition that organized to get the Santa Monica Airport closed down to aviation use after 2028. Yes. Over the past couple years, the city started the decision-making process that will determine what takes the space where the airport currently sits. Not even just to say if it's going to be a park and that's it. There's still a lot of questions about what the park looks like and how you design it. So we feel that the club should continue to have an influence on that process. So we're going to spend a few months studying this issue in depth so we can make meaningful and informed recommendations to council and not just say like, oh, it's 8:46 right now. We're going to speed through a couple of things and then have a vote at 10 o'clock when everyone's trying to go home. We really want to have a real conversation about this. So we're forming an ad hoc airport committee, which means that in addition to this meeting, we're going to have a special meeting on May 28th. And then we're going to have our June meeting, and that's when we're going to have our final vote. And in between then, there's going to be at least a couple of Zoom-only committee meetings where people who are on that committee will discuss in more detail so that when it comes back to the June meeting, the committee will be the one presenting the recommendation. Coming up in a couple of months, the City Council is going to have one of their first really big decision points on the airport, which is the environmental impact report. And they're going to be submitting a few specific options to study the environmental impact of those options if that was chosen. And after the EIR is submitted and comes back, it becomes very difficult for the City Council to decide to go in a completely different direction from what was studied. So that's why it's important that whatever this club decides we want to see and we want to advocate for, that be one of the things included in that EIR. So therefore, our project right now is focused around the timeline of that EIR and what we want to see included in there. But we're going to be flexible as this develops, and maybe there will be an opportunity to advocate at a different time, in which case we can reconstitute the committee and continue to do that studying. So we want people of all backgrounds to join this committee, whether you've been immersed in the airport issue for decades, or if this tonight is going to be your first time learning about the airport issue. Your perspective on all those different things is going to be valued and useful for the club's discussion. So if you want to sign up for the committee already and you haven't, just please reach out to the club, email us. There's a specific link. I've asked Patricia to put it into the Zoom chat, but if you're here in person, you'll get the emails from the club. You can just respond to that email and say you want to be on there. And also there's going to be a link in the email that goes out tomorrow morning that has it's the same as the last email. There's going to be a link. You fill out the form on Google Form and you'll be on the committee. And then we're going to send out a doodle poll. That'll be the first important decision of the committee is when we're going to meet, and we'll have that meeting, and the people who are there attending the meetings are going to be the ones who actually get to vote on the committee. So we want you to join. I don't care what your predisposition is on the park. We want your input in this discussion. That's how we're going to we're trying to activate more people in the club, and that you don't have to be on our board to be active. And this is one way that we're going to create more opportunities. Thanks, Cindy. You do need to be a member in good standing to join. If you're not, you can speak to Mike Soloff, who can help you there. Okay, so if you're not interested in joining the committee, but you just want to learn more about the airport, that's also welcome too. So tonight, we're going to start by hearing from a few different perspectives from community groups that are already actively organizing around the airport. Then the committee will meet. Then on May 28th, we're actually going to have a special presentation from city staff about the three visions that Sasaki, the developer of the park, is going to present. And then as of now, our plan is to meet again sometime after that to figure out our recommendation to the full membership. Then the full membership will finally get to vote, and that will be the position of the club. So even if you attend none of this, you can come back to the June meeting and you can still have your opinion heard at that point. So let's get started with our first presenting group, Airport to Park. This is the coalition that has led on the closure of the airport and has been active on this topic for many years. Speaking on their behalf is Frank Gruber. It'll be up here, and it'll probably be up here too. So, Nate, if you can pull up the first slideshow.
Just move this. If I put this on here, is that a problem?
That's okay. Yeah.
Okay.
This is pointing to you. You're good.
Okay. So good evening, Santa Monica Democrats. First thing I want to say is thanks to the club for having this process. I think it's great. I don't think anybody is going into this kind of depth into the issue as the club is doing, as just described by John. So as he said, I'm speaking here tonight on behalf of the Santa Monica Airport to Park Foundation. I'll talk about the organization in a minute, but by way of personal introduction, I've been involved in Santa Monica politics for over 30 years, going back to 1994 when I was treasurer of the campaign to approve the original Civic Center plan. After that, I was on the Housing Commission and then the Planning Commission until a slow-growth city council in the 90s did not reappoint me because I was considered too much in favor of housing development. I ran as a pro-housing candidate for city council in 2012 and 2014, and I lost both times. I say this because inasmuch as I've been in favor of building more housing for 30-plus years, you might think it is ironic that I'm not here tonight speaking in favor of housing at the airport, but rather in favor of a great park. But it is not ironic. It is not ironic because more housing development, which is happening in Santa Monica, means even more need for parks. Specifically, a great park that is healthful, sustainable, and accessible to all. The airport land is our last and only possibility for providing future generations critical parkland for our growing population. Let's begin with some history of the site. In the 1920s, oh, wait a minute, we never got the, okay. All right, well, we're now getting into the meat of it. Okay, it's that little thing there, if we can make that bigger, there it is. Okay, that's how we start, but we'll go to, okay. So let's begin with a little history. In the 1920s, there were many proposals for parks to support population growth in the LA region, but few were realized. One that was realized was a park at what is now the airport. It happened because Santa Monica voters passed a parks bond to acquire the land in 1926. So next slide, please. Okay, well, that's a bond over there. Okay. This original great park in the 20s and 30s included tennis courts, playing fields and playgrounds, archery, skeet shooting, lawn bowling, a golf course, and many other recreational and sports amenities. Interestingly, a 900-acre county park was proposed to be adjacent, but that never happened. Next slide, please. Okay, the green dot there, the green square, that's the Santa Monica Park. And the black area, that was the proposed county park that never happened. And there were parks proposed all over LA County at that time. None of them happened, or very few of them happened. Okay, the next slide, please. Okay, so here's a close-up of the Santa Monica Park. At the time, amateur aviation was treated as a park use with a grass landing strip called Clover Field. That's the area in brown over on the left. Donald Douglas had a workshop there, which is on the lower left to the side there. But with World War II looming, the federal government took control of the land for the use of Douglas aircraft. The park was closed and one of the world's biggest factories was constructed. Next slide, please. They used machines like this to create the runway. After the war, Douglas continued to operate its plant until the 60s when the company moved to Long Beach. The business park on Ocean Park Boulevard replaced the factory. The airport continued to operate as a general aviation airport. Starting around 1980, the FAA, the Federal Aviation Administration, required the airport to service jets, and the airport ultimately became a major home and host for private jets. Next slide, please. People protested the jets as shown in this photo, and that's Ted Lieu down there, kind of a young Ted Lieu. And Marty Rubin is to his left, and a bunch of other people there. They're protesting the jets. But they protested, but this was a classic case of what is so common in America. A public resource, the land the city purchased with the 1926 Parks Bond being co-opted for private use, often for the benefit of business and the wealthy. I won't go into all the details, but for nearly half a century, the city has been trying to close the airport, which involved epic battles with the FAA. Under an agreement in 1984, the city had the right to close the airport in 2015, but the FAA reneged. Starting around 15 years ago, the city began a new round of litigation to secure its rights and reclaim the land. The aviation industry responded by gathering signatures to put a measure on the 2014 ballot to take away the city's right to close the airport. Our organization, Airport to Park, arose from the group of volunteers who formed to oppose the aviation industry's ballot measure. Next slide, please. There we are. We started by trying to persuade people not to sign the petitions. Next slide, please. What you see there in the middle was a sign that we would take to grocery store parking lots to try to persuade people not to sign. Since we couldn't interrupt them, we wanted to try to get the conversation going. Well, we slowed down the signature gathering effort, but ultimately aviation spent enough money to get the signatures they needed. Once the aviation industry had collected the signatures, members of the city council, which cannot run campaigns for or against ballot measures, came to our group to organize the campaign against aviation's ballot measure, which appeared on the ballot as Measure D. We formed the official campaign committee against it. Aviation's campaign for its measure was largely based on fear of development. They claimed that if the airport closed, it would be replaced with something like Century City or Playa Vista. In response, the City Council unanimously voted to put a countermeasure on the ballot. The measure, called Measure LC for local control, provided that if the airport closes, the only development that can occur there without approval by a public vote are parks, public open spaces, and recreation. Next slide, please. And so there you see the yes on LC and the no on D. Both D and LC were on the 2014 ballot. It was a hard-fought election. Aviation spent over $1 million. Our committee was able to raise about $135,000 from almost 500 individual donors. Most important, we were able to organize a wall-to-wall coalition of community and political organizations, including the Dem Club. We had many volunteers and waged a grassroots campaign. In the end, LC passed in a landslide with 60%, and D was crushed with only 40%. Three years later, the city settled its litigation with the FAA with the landmark 2017 settlement agreement, which allows the city to close the airport January 1st, 2029. Shortly after that, the City Council voted to close the airport on that date. However, we at Airport to Park do not believe the battle to return the airport land to the public is necessarily over. We have operated under the assumption that aviation will try once again with a new ballot measure to perpetuate the airport. Since 2017, we at Airport to Park have seen our role as keeping the promise of the Great Park alive during the 12 years leading up to closure, so as to be vigilant against aviation's next move. The promise of the Great Park is one that is well worth keeping alive. We together have the opportunity to create a great park that will serve generations to come. Urban parks, the lungs of the city, are essential for both social and environmental reasons. They are also good economically, attracting businesses, facilitating housing, and increasing municipal revenues. There is no argument. Parks are essential for so many reasons, including their contributions to physical and mental health, environmental well-being, improved biodiversity, climate crisis mitigation, reclaiming stormwater, reducing heat island effects, improved social interaction, and economic growth. Next slide, please. Because Santa Monica lost its great park, the city is woefully underparked, as the next slide shows. Next slide. Okay, what you see here, this is a chart that shows the ratio of parkland to population in 21 California cities. You see Santa Monica at the bottom, with only 1.4 acres per park per 1,000 residents. The ratio, by the way, is even worse in the adjacent neighborhoods of LA, which is often less than 1 acre per 1,000. Planners consider 3 acres per 1,000 to be the bare minimum. And I don't know if you can read the cities, but they go down Fremont, Santa Cruz, Sacramento, everything, we're down at the bottom. So the next slide, please. The next slide compares the percentages of parks to the overall size of cities. Once again, Santa Monica is at the bottom, with parks covering only 2.5% of the city's area. You have Irvine, San Francisco has 20% of its area as parks. We're at 2.5%. LA is somewhere in there. Dense urban population and parks have a symbiotic relationship. The most dense cities in North America, including New York, Chicago, Boston, San Francisco, Philadelphia, Toronto, and Vancouver, all have greater park acres per 1,000 residents and a greater percentage of park space per city area than Santa Monica does. While Santa Monica and the region suffer from a lack of housing, particularly for the rising millennial and Z generations who are busy forming households, as well as for workers in employment centers like Santa Monica, these figures show that we also suffer from a critical lack of parks. Anyone who has had a kid in sports, or anyone who plays adult sports, or anyone who likes to take a walk in nature knows this. The public certainly knows this. Participation in the current park conversion process has been extraordinarily high and highly supportive of a great park. Next slide, please. There have been thousands of comments, mostly in favor of the park. The 800 people who showed up at a workshop in December numbered more than anyone could remember for a planning event in Santa Monica. Next slide, please. These are both from the December event. The new great park at the airport will be a spectacular public resource with views running from the Pacific to downtown Los Angeles. There will be room for recreation, culture, and nature, a legacy for future generations. We respect the motivations of those proposing housing at the airport site. Santa Monica needs more housing, but Santa Monica is now getting more housing. State laws now facilitate housing development, and in response to state requirements, much of Santa Monica has been upzoned for more residential development. As the Dem Club knows, because the Dem Club helped elect them, Santa Monica now has its first strongly pro-housing city council. This council has now already restarted efforts to develop, primarily with affordable housing, city-owned properties like Bergamont Station and 4th in Arizona, which are located close to transit and other urban services. Private developers are building more housing, and other property owners, including the owners of the business park adjacent to the airport, have indicated that they want to build housing too. These privately financed housing developments by law will include affordable housing. After decades of no growth in population, Santa Monica's population has been increasing the past 20 years, and it will continue to increase. More people will mean the need for more parks, especially for people who don't live in single-family homes with backyards. They will need more playing fields and other recreational facilities, more barbecues and picnic tables, more walking paths, more community gardens and farms, more cultural facilities, more environmental resilience. There are many places in Santa Monica to build housing, as shown in the 2010 land use element of the general plan, which called for infill housing along transit corridors and downtown and in former industrial areas, and as provided in the zoning update since the last housing element. In contrast, most of the airport land is not suitable for housing. Little of it is near transit, and most of it, having never been developed, lacks infrastructure like streets, water, and sewer lines, and utilities. The cost of developing that infrastructure would need to be added to the already high cost of building housing. Building housing on undeveloped or isolated land at the airport will not have the social, financial, or environmental benefits of infill development. Next slide, please. Meanwhile, the wide open land at the airport, perfect and necessary for a great park, could never be assembled again. It is a unique resource for a park, and once built on, it would never become available again for public use. Cut down in size, it will be impossible for a park there to serve both social and environmental needs. For all these reasons, A2P believes that the city should proceed with plans to reclaim airport land as a great park. By the way, the flowers that you see here, the wildflowers you see in this photo, are on land at the airport that the city liberated when, under the 2017 agreement, it was allowed to reduce the length of the runway by 1,500 feet. You're not allowed to walk on that property now, but you can see it. Lastly, there is one additional angle to consider. namely the threat of a new ballot measure from the aviation industry to keep the airport operating as an airport. That threat would be intensified if there is any attempt to amend Measure LC before airport closure in 2029. If aviation hires signature gatherers like they did in 2014 to bring a measure to the ballot and then get the measure on the ballot, in their campaign to perpetuate the airport, they will use fear and capitalize on any confusion or discouragement the public perceives about the park. A ballot measure to amend LC would give them ammunition. Aviation will say that Measure LC's promise of parkland was a bait and switch. Santa Monica voters have been supportive of housing over the decades, but no pro-housing ballot measure has ever faced $1 million spent against it. That's what aviation spent in 2014. We defeated them then, but that's because we had a united front. That's not likely for an amendment of LC, particularly if it comes before the public has seen a good plan for a park and before airport closure. It was a great victory to limit Measure D to 40% of the vote, but consider, with a base of 40% who voted to keep the airport, aviation only needs another 10% to win. They can get it if the public is confused or discouraged about the park. If aviation won a ballot initiative, that would mean that our public land would remain privatized. Even the money the city makes from leasing offices at the airport would remain in the airport fund and not be available for other purposes. To repeat, a ballot measure to amend LC before closure would only encourage aviation to bring forward a countermeasure to perpetuate the airport. This is a risk we should not take, and it is presumably why Gleam Davis, in December 2023, at the meeting where City Council began the airport conversion process, stated that any ballot measure to amend LC should take place after closure. A ballot measure before closure would also throw a wrench into the conversion process, delaying it. We all know that delay is one of those things that discourages the public about government. In conclusion, the airport land provides us with a chance to leave a legacy for generations to come. A legacy like those that have been passed down to us. A legacy of optimism, of public and civic generosity, and inclusion that is part of who we as Santa Monicans are. A great park at the airport will be perfectly consistent with how Santa Monica manages and hosts the beach, the pier, and the promenade for residents, for the region, and for the world. Let's liberate the public land at the airport, not reprivatize it. The airport land is essential for housing, but not as housing. That's a message that is both small d democratic and capital D democratic. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Frank. And next up, we have a proposal called Cloverfield Commons, presented by Vivian Rothstein, and as well as Santa Monica Forward co-chair Bradley Ewing. Let them know. Nate, we'll want the other slideshow on now. Okay.
So good evening. I'm really happy to be here. And kudos to the Democratic Club for putting the Democratic into Democratic Club, because this organization really allows for grassroots decision-making, grassroots engagement. Those of you who are leaders in this organization devote enormous amount of time. But without organizations, we really can't make change. We're just a bunch of individuals with opinions. So it is a very precious thing, and I'm honored to be here. And kudos to the Airport to Park people for getting the airport closed. I voted for LC. I wasn't really voting for a park. I was voting to close the airport, as I think most Santa Monicans were. So I wanted to tell you just a little bit about myself. And how I got involved in this issue about the park redevelopment. My daughter wrote a book with her dad called Just Action, and it was a follow-up to a book called The Color of Law about the history of residential segregation in our country and how segregation was not really a choice that Americans made not to live near each other. It was made through federal and state laws and city laws, and it was also made by lending institutions, private ones and federal ones. And the book Just Action is about how cities can take action and are taking action to desegregate their communities. And as a proud mother, I went to hear my daughter give one of her speeches, and she talked about land trusts. And I didn't really know about land trusts before, but I realized that here in Santa Monica, we have a nearly 200-acre land trust, which is land that is owned by the people of Santa Monica. Now, other cities and counties work for years to pull together parcels for a land trust so that they can build affordable housing and housing that serves what's called the missing middle, the working people who can't afford market rate housing. And we had a land trust here, and I realized how embarrassed I would be if we did not consider using a portion of that land for housing. And this was about 2 years ago, and I talked to my friend Joan Ling, who had been the director of Community Corporation for 20 years, now retired, and we decided to put together a group of people, local residents, to figure out what we would really like to do with the land. What was the just thing to do with the land? What was responding not to the 1920s, but to the present and to this profound housing crisis that is actually all over our country, but is very deep and persistent in Los Angeles County. So about 14 of us, people who really didn't know each other before, but representing different ages, different housing situations, different neighborhoods, we met every month for a year and a half, and we hammered out what we thought should be done with the land. And we did research, we talked about our values, and we came up with a proposal that's called Cloverfield Commons, and it proposes using half of the available land for below market rate housing and the other half of the available land for a park, for a great park. We feel that these are very compatible uses, and I want to say a few things about the park issue. I know that the argument is always made that we are park poor, but in fact, those figures don't count the 3.5 miles of beachfront and the 245 acres of sand that are at the Santa Monica beaches, not to speak of the grassy areas and all the recreation activities that are available at the beach. And I know I'm a resident who goes to the beach often, and probably most of you are too. It is part of our open space. It is part of our community space. So I don't feel like we're as desperate for open space as it's portrayed. Also, I'm a over 40-year resident of Sunset Park, and in the 80s, I worked for the city manager's office when the Progressive Coalition first took over the city, and I actually participated in the community input process for the development of Clover Park. And I know that there is a pressing demand for sports fields from a lot of organized sports groups, and there was a lot of demand for Clover Park. And I think organized sports are important. But if you look at Clover Park, it's the passive uses that are really busy and the big sports fields that are empty most of the week, as I walk there frequently. I'm not against sports fields, but I am for housing. And if you think about our parks, we're not park poor. The poor are in our parks because they don't have any place to live. And we can't just go forward as if this is not a crisis that is going to it's going to be with us until we address it as a society and as a culture and as a city. So we have a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to utilize the land that belongs to us for the benefits of the future of our city. So I wanted to say, living in Sunset Park, things have really changed over the years since I've lived there. On my block down the street, it used to be the fire chief who lived there. Around the corner was a librarian for Will Rogers School. Across my alley was somebody who worked at City Yards. It is no longer possible for people doing those jobs to live in Santa Monica. Very few are able to live in Santa Monica. And in my neighborhood, millionaires are buying up the properties and building huge homes. And of course, that's their right in a private property economy. But we're talking about land that could be used with a different vision. So given what's happened with prices, this is one thing our group looked into. There are 81,000 people who have reportable jobs, that are reported to the state that work in Santa Monica now, 81,000. And of those, only 7,000 live here. So we have over 70,000 people on our streets. And if you live in Sunset Park, all of our throughways are freeways now starting at 2 o'clock in the afternoon. It took me an hour and a half the other day to get to Culver City because of the traffic. And it's not just congestion for us, it's what it does to the people who work here, to their family lives. I've talked to nurses who commute 2 hours each way. They can't have dinner with their kids. It's really affected their personal lives, and the schools, the hospitals, even the hotels have a hard time hiring people because people can't live anywhere near the city. So part of our proposal, we have a proposal to use half of the land for housing, below market rate housing, starting with low income, very low, moderate, and up to 150% of the area AMI, which for a family of 4 would be $106,000 a year. So we're envisioning a community that's a mixed economic community without the very upper crust people who can afford a lot of these new apartments, which are extremely expensive, or the single family homes. But a mixed economic community that is what drew me and many of us to Santa Monica. We also feel it can address the historic discrimination against African Americans who were displaced by the building of the 10 freeway and the original owners of the land, the Tongva. There could be opportunities for people to have preferences in these units because of past wrongs that were committed against them and their communities. So we feel there's a lot of opportunity. It would make the park safer to have human eyes on the park, to have people around the park, and plenty of room for fields. And anyway, that is our vision. And the last thing I want to say is there is really no money for a park, but housing comes with money. There would be, because the land would be owned by the city, there would be a steady stream of funding to fund the park forever in the future, because there would be money paid to the city for use of the land. It would be moderate amounts, but it would be money. And there are various ways to fund housing. There's state funding for low-income housing and developments that are environmentally sensitive and have opportunities for transit that is not a car. There's also the possibility that industries in Santa Monica, like the local hospital industries and the hotel industries, and just as the school district is talking about it, that they could fund some housing units for their employees. And this is something that used to be done back in the 40s when employers funded workforce housing. There's also the possibility of bonds. I mean, we feel like housing and what housing represents in terms of building community provides opportunities to bring resources and make the park possible. So I'm going to stop, and Brad, who was a member of our visioning committee, is going to talk about the state, the climate in terms of state requirements in Santa Monica. Thank you.
Sure. So I'll do a quick intro. This is my first time speaking in front of the Santa Monica Democratic Club, so thank you all for having me. As John said earlier, I'm the co-chair of Santa Monica Forward, I'm not speaking on behalf of that organization today, but it's an organization that we stand for housing and mobility and equity within the city of Santa Monica. I personally was radicalized by my commute from Santa Clarita to Santa Monica every day. So I lost about 3 days of my life every day to the commute on the 405. And a lot of time in the car kind of gets you thinking, why is it like this? Why, when I look at the price of rent in Santa Monica, so if I could live close to my work, I'd be paying more than my parents do for a 4-bedroom, single-family home in the suburbs, right? And, when I started really digging into the policy, what really became evident to me was we have a severe shortage of housing in most communities throughout the state of California, and this really is a problem nationally, but I think it's most acute here in Santa Monica, or within California. And it's something that I take really personally, and I see the impact on my friends and on my family. I come from a very large family. I have 12 cousins of my generation, 8 of which are from California. All of those cousins have been forced to leave California due to the cost of living. And it's really unfortunate. My cousin Alex, he's transgender. Having to leave a state like California where he's afforded significant protections for who he is really devastating. Fortunately, he and his wife were able to find living arrangements in Washington State, a place that is pretty good and protective. But some of my other family members aren't so lucky. I've had several cousins who've had to go to Austin. Austin's a great city, don't get me wrong, but the state of Texas does not afford the same protections to you and I that the state of California or the state of Washington does, right? And so for all of those reasons, I think it's really important that we do look at this as an opportunity to build a great park, but also to build community there as well, to make space for some who have been displaced from Santa Monica or who can't afford to live here. So I have a short presentation titled RHNA 2029. I don't know if we can get that up there. Cool. I see it on this, but I don't see it on the big screen. Cool. So I'm going to get kind of into the technical policy weeds a little bit. I won't try to linger on this too long, but so RHNA, what we kind of in the housing activist biz call RHNA for short. So Santa Monica's future housing mandate, the housing must go somewhere. So next slide, please. So what is RHNA? What is RHNA? So the Regional Housing Needs Assessment is mandated by state housing law as part of this periodic process of updating local housing elements of city general plans. And so that quantifies the amount of housing that each city or municipality needs to build during those 8-year planning periods. So we're currently in what's called the 6th cycle. So the Southern California Association of Governments, aka SCAG, adopted its 6th cycle allocation plan in 2021, which covered October 2021 to October 2029. So our region, and that covers a lot of Southern California, was mandated to plan and to build over 1.3 million new homes, which was distributed across almost 200 cities, and just under 9,000 were assigned to Santa Monica. And starting within the 6th cycle, the 5 earlier cycles were kind of a bit of a joke. It was sort of just a checking the box exercise that was handed down by the state. But a lot of reforms that were passed at the end of the last decade really gave teeth to these, to the housing element process and really kind of put penalties. So for example, I'm sure a lot of you are familiar with Santa Monica and several other cities within Santa Monica being subject to something called the builder's remedy. That's sort of the stick that was coming down from the state of California, where if you don't kind of follow these laws, then you sort of get that power taken away from you. And the sort of philosophy that the state is taking is that this sort of 50-plus year experiment of local control without local responsibility doesn't work. So we have to change the incentives. We have to address the severe housing shortage that we find ourselves under. And so some of those changes include a more quantified and objective way of measuring what housing need is within cities and within regional areas. So it's reflected in low vacancy rates, high overcrowding rates, super commuters coming from outside the region. That last one was not really in play within the 6th cycle, but it will be in the 7th, and that's important because, as I can personally attest to, there's a lot of super commuters coming into Santa Monica, and a lot of former colleagues of mine. I have people coming in from Palmdale, from Redlands, from Irvine. These are people, powering our city. When I was diagnosed with type 1 diabetes 5 years ago, the nurses who were attending to me in the middle of the night were all literally, 4 of them were sharing a room on the west side in Westwood, so they could actually afford to be near their jobs and not have to commute, a hellish commute every day. And so the 7th cycle is coming. The city will likely start planning for it in 2028 and into 2029. And then the policy changes that the city will have to do will likely occur in 2030, 2031. Next slide, please. So how are we doing? The unfortunate answer is we're not doing quite well. So Santa Monica, in order to fulfill its needs, we need to build about 1,110 units a year. We are building a fraction of that. So I don't know if you can all see this. I apologize for cramming all of these visuals into one slide. Maybe a little bit too information dense. But there's been a lot of significant headwinds. And so some of those, unfortunately, are outside of our control. We can't control what Jerome Powell does with interest rates. We can't really control what the lunatic in the White House does with tariffs, and that explodes the price of lumber, for example. But some of the headwinds are self-inflicted. And I think Frank did talk about this a little bit, where I think I am bullish a little bit on the future that will correct for some of the mistakes that we've made, but we have lost a lot of time. So the previous council, which this Democratic Club worked so hard to defeat and put in real progressive champions, pro-housing champions, really kind of sandbagged the housing plans that we put in place for the sixth cycle. So we really limited the amount of land that was zoned for affordable housing. The initial plan was rejected by the state. That's why we were subject to the builder's remedy. And so what this all means is this puts us on track for a comparable or even larger requirement in 2029. So within the 2029, Santa Monica is looking at probably in the ballpark of it, again, probably another 9,000, 10,000 units that we have to plan for. And if we don't plan for and facilitate the construction of those units, then we will be subject to further penalties. So next slide, please. So one way that we can address this, one way to meet our future needs, is by building community at Cloverfield Commons. And I think, as Frank so eloquently said, density and parks go well together. They're two great flavors that go well together. The unfortunate reality today, though, is if you look at the land around the area of where we want to build our great park, is it's currently zoned for the least dense, most exclusionary type of housing. And this isn't a dig on, if you're living in Sunset Park or if you're living these, you're not bad for living in these types of homes, but it is the most exclusive access. So I looked at Zillow when I was on my way over here. On the LA side of the airport, it's a median price of over $3 million to buy a home. On the Sunset Park side, it's a little bit better, but it's still over $2 million. So the cost of entry to be within walking distance of this park is a $400,000 down payment and a 5-figure mortgage payment to the bank. That's not equitable. We don't think that's sustainable. We think there's a huge opportunity here to meet our affordable housing needs, to build real community, and to preserve and expand the diversity of Santa Monica. Other cities have done this to great success. Miller, I know it's typed as Muller, but that's how the guy who lived in Austin in the early 1900s liked to be called. In Austin, used to be an airport that was converted into Parks Plus housing, and the same thing with the Central Park in Denver. So it's been done before. We know it can work, and we know it can build great, thriving communities. And that's all I've got, and I'll hand it back to Ms. Vivian Rothstein. Or I thought you had you didn't have another slideshow? Oh, my apologies. I thought there was more slides.
All right, thank you, Vivian and Brad. And finally, this evening, we'll be joined by Santa Monica Sustainability Commissioner David Pettit. He is the senior attorney at the Center for Biological Diversity and the former senior attorney at Natural Resources Defense Council. And he joins us to look at these land use decisions through a sustainability lens.
That's okay. I'm too tall for these things. Thank you for having me tonight. The last time I was up here with a mic.
You'll be fine if you just put it on here. Point it here. You'll be good. You'll be good.
All right.
Yeah, if you want to go handheld, we have
a... Last time I was up here with a mic, I sang a song for my wife, Lynn Nalaboff's birthday, and you'll be happy to know I'm not going to put you through that tonight. Thank you. I am, as Joe said, I'm a member of the Santa Monica Sustainability Commission. I'm an environmental lawyer. I've been one for a long time. We do a lot of work suing the Trump administration, suing oil companies and the like. And yeah, well, you have to. We have to be doing that. And I've done a lot of CEQA litigation, and I want to talk to you about some of that tonight. Frank mentioned this a bit. CEQA is an acronym for the California Environmental Quality Act. And whatever decision the city council finally makes in terms of how to go forward. They're going to have to do an analysis under CEQA and do an environmental impact report. CEQA is often litigated, often by me, but not in this case, but often litigated, and there's lots of ways to make mistakes that opponents can jump on to delay projects. So, I mean, I've talked to city staff about this a few times, that they need to be extra careful in how they do the CEQA analysis here, because I can guarantee you 100% someone's going to sue. Somebody's not going to like whatever the city council does. They're going to sue under CEQA, and then it's going to get resolved in court. And, you know, whatever you all may think of arguments pro or con, we're not making the call. Some, you know, man or woman wearing the robe who's a friend of the governor sitting in court, they're going to be making the call. And that's something that people need to take into account, not just how we look at it, but how a court might look at it not too far down the road. In terms of context, I guess I should probably say I'm not speaking officially for the Sustainability Commission tonight. I'm just talking from me. In terms of context, I think Frank mentioned this a little, but there was a lawsuit between the city and the FAA that dragged on for a long time. The FAA was saying, no, you have to use this as an airport forever. The city said, no, how about next week? And then, you know, to my astonishment, the parties got together and settled the case. Cases and the settlement got signed off by the federal judge, and that's what gives the city council the right, but not the requirement, to close the airport starting in 2029. And under LC, proper LC, as you know, there are certain uses that the city council can effectuate without a vote, and other uses need a vote. So that's kind of where we are. The three choices that the city council is considering, in my opinion, as a CEQA litigator, they'd be nuts not to put all of those, not to study all of those in the environmental document they're going to have to do. One of the things you're supposed to do under CEQA is consider all the reasonable alternatives to the project that you want. And if they don't study housing, someone's going to say, well, you should have done this. You know, all these people showed up and said you should do it, and they didn't do it. So, Judge, they should have done it. And that could be a winning argument. So it seems to me almost a no-brainer that in whatever the council decides to do eventually, they ought to do a full analysis of what housing would bring, what the environmental effects would be on housing. And in that connection, I do want to talk a little about the idea of cumulative impacts. And it's funny, when Vivian was talking, I'm Vivian's neighbor. I used to play guitar with the fire chief. He was a jazz drummer in his youth. But yeah, our neighborhood has totally changed since we moved in there like 42 years ago or something. And what we're seeing now is more and more of these big projects going up. There's the Gelson's project, Gelson's parking lot, 550 units, something like that. The project on Pico, near us, it's 100 units. And, whatever builder's remedy and other things get built between now and 2029. And if you add 3,000 units in the park to that, that's really doubling the population of Sunset Park in a very short period of time. And the city, in doing the CIR, needs to look at all of those impacts sort of mushed together and analyze that, not just the one project, but the whole mess of new housing, the whole group of new housing projects, and ask, well, what's going to happen? What's going to happen to air pollution and noise? Traffic itself is not a CEQA impact, but air pollution as a result of traffic is. What's going to happen to circulation in the city? Is there going to be enough water? Is there going to be enough police, enough fire, enough schools? Where are these kids going to go to school who are going to live in the new units? They need to look at all of that stuff. And if they don't, I think they're putting themselves in a vulnerable position when and if somebody attacks the project later on. And, I just think in terms of advocacy, I think, Vivian, from your standpoint and your group's standpoint, my view is that you guys ought to address that stuff and not count on the city to do it for you. Because if the city staff or the city hires a consultant and comes out a way that you don't like, you're kind of stuck with that. And the way CEQA litigation works is the court looks at, the city makes a choice, and the court looks at whether there is substantial evidence in the record to support it. The court isn't going to dive in and weigh the evidence and pick which expert is right. Court's going to look and say, yeah, there's some evidence here, looks good to me, you're out. That's kind of how it happens in practice. So if you are thinking that, well, if the city says something we don't like, we'll put in our experts and then our experts are better than their experts, that may be how it works in this room. That's not how it works in court. You need to make sure that at best you can that the city is going to come out, their consultants are going to come out your way. Otherwise, you're setting yourself up to lose a CEQA case. So my message on that is don't wait for the city to do it for you. All this cumulative impact stuff and the traffic and all this stuff, I think that if people who want housing need to deal with that reality, that's going to be looked at. And you need to do it yourself first. That's my view, anyhow. There's one other thing I want to address, and it's kind of a wild card, and it's the Surplus Lands Act. It's this weird state statute that has to do with when, in this case, a city decides to get rid of property that it owns. I think there was an assumption in the last couple of talks that if there's housing built, the city would own it and run it. I'm not sure that's true. I mean, look at what Community Corporation did that Joan Ling ran for years. The city didn't, they own lots of affordable housing units in the city, but they own it. It's a nonprofit, they own it. The city doesn't own that land. The city doesn't run the units. So it may be that the city doesn't want to be a landlord for 3,000 new units, and they might want some nonprofit to come in and run it. But if they do that, if the city either sells city land or leases it for 15 years or more, that triggers a state statute called the Surplus Lands Act. What that is very complicated, but what it basically does is sets up a bidding process where the city says, well, we're going to get rid of some land. Who'd like it? And then people bid on it. No, really. And then people bid on it, and then there's this whole bidding war thing. I mean, the city can limit that to affordable housing. There's lots of affordable housing providers out there who might want to do this. And the city doesn't really control who has the best bid. And then if somebody comes in from the outside, bids for the property, and gets it, because of the density bonuses in state law that we're seeing play out in the Gelson's project and in the project on Pico, the housing could be designed by the new owner in a way that the city doesn't like or has new control over. And I've seen the renderings, the maps that you folks have made. They look pretty cool, but that's not necessarily what a new owner would want to do. And there's no guarantee that if the city decides to sell the land, that the kind of project that you guys are thinking about is what's going to get built. And so that's really a critical decision point, I think, that people need to get straight with the city and city staff. You guys going to own it? You guys going to sell it to somebody else? You guys going to lease it? Or what? Because that can have very serious consequences down the line on what actually gets built there and who runs it. Who's going to be dealing with the everyday landlord-tenant issues, and who's going to decide who lives there and who doesn't live there and the like, and what it's going to look like. What's the massing going to be? How many stories? All of that stuff could be out of the city's hands. So I think that's another consideration that people need to pay attention to. I mean, it's kind of technical lawyer-like stuff, but that's kind of what I do for a living. And I guess my bottom line is that things aren't as easy as housing's a moral right, let's build it. There's a lot of legal stuff that the city needs to be very careful about in making its decision and in deciding what it's going to analyze under the state environmental laws. I mean, that there's no requirement if the city analyzes 3 options under CEQA, there's no requirement that the city has to choose the environmentally best one. They just have to look at them. They have to analyze them. They can pick any one they want. But if they don't analyze one that's a reasonable alternative, they're going to lose in court, and we're going to have to do this all over again. So with that depressing note, thank you for your time this evening. It's complicated, but here we are. Thank you.
Thanks, David. That was really insightful. I think everyone would agree, really good feedback for everybody. Okay, so we have a few minutes. I guess if there's 1 or 2 questions that anybody wanted to ask of the presenters before we break for the night. Yeah, Craig. And then just the presenters, just listen. If you want to respond, you can. Craig?
consider a both and.
A what?
Housing as well as farm. Yeah. Or if not, how big of a housing thing, and then how big of a park?
You want to go first?
Yeah, that's actually our proposal, is that half be a great park and half be housing. So right now there's 192 acres that would be available for development. So they would have to be designed to be integrated into each, so that it works. But so it's both a great park and housing. That's our proposal.
As a follow-up to that, how much would be considered affordable?
Well, that's something we want all of it to be below market rate, but not all very low income, but a mix of very low, moderate, and up to 150% of the area median income for a family of four. So it would be an economic mix. It wouldn't be all, all one or another, but a mix, like a normal community without the very wealthy, which is a normal community. But it's what, Santa Monica has always been, this mix. But it's really a vision that we're trying to promote, to get us thinking together about how do we build a community there, and what kind of community do we want to build, and who is in need of the housing, and who we want to serve. Yeah.
Frank, do you want to weigh in too?
Well, it's obviously to answer your question, Craig, sure. I mean, there's a theoretical, you could do anything you want there in a theoretical point of view. I think we have to deal with the realities and the law. I guess what I would really like to say here is that we should wait a little bit and see what the city staff and Sasaki come up with in this next round, because the city council gave them direction to come up with 3 templates, one of which would be absolutely compliant with Measure LC, which would mean not only no housing, but a whole lot of other little things that couldn't go there, like a big amphitheater or all sorts of stuff, or a restaurant. They wanted a second one, which might be LC compliant if there were changes made to zoning laws that would bring certain things under the definition of park. And then they had a third one, which they explicitly said would not be LC compliant and would be designed so that land at the airport would be used to help finance the park. And as part of that, staff at Sasaki would look at housing. And if any of you have done this current Survey 3A that is going through, there's a whole section in there on housing possibilities. So, yeah, to answer your question, yes, there could be housing there. Whether it's a good idea or not, as you heard us say, we think that this land, every square foot of the open land. Now, keep in mind that not all the land at the airport is open. There is already developed land there. And some of us thought that LC allowed for the conversions of buildings into other uses. Apparently, the city attorney says that that doesn't work, but we'll leave that aside. But we think that, as Vivian just said, what she has is a vision. One thing I would absolutely say is that I don't think a vision about housing is going to be passed by the city of Santa Monica voters. And there won't be anything more than a vision until we get through this process. And as David pointed out, and John, I want to contradict something I think you said before, which is that this EIR sets a decision that is, irrevocable. No, the EIRs have alternatives. So this question does not get answered at the end of this year. The question goes on.
Yeah.
And I guess I'm going to give probably some advice that my own people would say, don't bother giving it. And my old friends in the housing movement probably don't want to hear it from me. But they're very unlikely to pass something if it's a vague pro-housing amendment to LC. They theoretically might, and I'm not saying I'd vote for it or not, but they could conceivably given Santa Monica's propensity to vote for housing, if they came up with something very detailed like the Civic Center plan in 1994, it might pass. But our group thinks that there are lots of places to put housing in Santa Monica, that the cost of building 3,000 units is probably more than $2 billion. I mean, think of what a housing unit, affordable housing unit costs even without lumber going up, $600,000, $700,000. It's a $2 billion process. That money doesn't exist. I mean, the money, and money does exist for a park. There's plenty of money around for park development. This is one of the richest communities in the world, as Vivian was just pointing out what people are paying for houses here. It's a very wealthy community, and the most expensive part of the park has already been paid for 99 years ago. The $2 billion worth of land. So I just think we need to wait a little bit to answer some of these detailed questions. We should see what this excellent staff consultants have brought in and see what they come up with. But there's a lot of things the City Council has said to play with. I hope that answers.
I just wanted to clarify one thing, that in our proposal, we feel that the land should be owned by the city in perpetuity. And so the housing units can be affordable in perpetuity, not to be sold off, that it is a housing trust for the people and the people who live and work in Santa Monica.
Okay, we'll go to Jerry next, and then I got you after that, Ann. Oh, yeah, thanks. Yeah, good point.
First of all, I just want to, again, thank everyone. I agree with Frank that take the time. We need to be unified. I wanted to say something respectfully about Ted Lieu. One of the first guys to support closing the airport and supporting a park. Same with the late Bill Rosendahl, who was also in that picture. May he rest in peace. And same with Karen Bass, that work with these groups that got this ballot measure passed. And I'm a big supporter of affordable housing and low-income housing. And my gosh, I still think what Frank said, wait till after the airport closes to do this, and let's all work together to keep these NIMBYs that keep opposing this low-income housing and transit corridors and anywhere in the city. And then we'll have a great park, because we haven't even heard yet tonight from the Great Park Coalition of everything that's proposed environmentally and recreationally and culturally that could go in that not really that big area. And all the other areas around the city in the perimeter where there is opportunity for housing. I'm just afraid, as Frank, absolutely. They'll try anything, and with Donald Trump behind them, they'll do anything to divide us and take a last stand to keep that airport opening. And that'll hurt the environmentalists, that'll hurt the housing people, hurt everyone. So we need to stay unified and make this compliant with what the voters voted for. Thank you.
Okay, Ann, we'll go to you next, and then I'll come around. I got Mitchell, and I got you, and probably we'll be out of time at that point, but did you want to go? Vivian, if you, do you mind, or okay, as long as someone does.
Thank you so much. Just quick question for Cloverfield Commons. So if the land will remain owned by the city in perpetuity, how will the housing and all the new infrastructure be paid for? Who will pay for it? What's your plan?
Well, do you want to talk?
No, she.
Oh. Is this, yeah, okay, this is on. Well, so, what? We have a mic.
Okay, go ahead, you guys. Just talk.
So, variety of ways we could raise money on land. So we could do a ground lease. You know, I'm blanking on the name of the development that was done in Playa, but that was done there. City could do a bond. You know, city could enter a public-private partnership. There's state credits, and God willing, hopefully there'll be federal funding in 2029 and onward. I think we're all hoping for that, regardless of where we stand on if there should be housing or not as part of this great park. And I think there's lots of other ways that we see that we could raise money. We're trying to do entertainment zone in downtown Santa Monica. I spoke to that at council last night, and I'm very optimistic that that's going to be a way to sort of revitalize our struggling downtown. That'll bring more businesses back in. That'll bring more, tax revenue back in, more sales taxes. Hopefully, the more housing coming into places like downtown Santa Monica, more property taxes. And so, I think there's lots of ways that we can get creative to bring in the funding. And as Vivian said earlier, I think there are lots of funding streams that are available to us. And I think something that we didn't talk about up there, but something that we've discussed within our group at Cloverfield Commons is trying to have, discourage car use for people who do live at the housing that's on that land, right? Partially out of traffic concerns, partially out of environmental concerns. But there's also funding streams that are available for that from the mobility side of things where we could get more funding streams that way as well. And then, is there anything else you want to add?
Yeah, just that I had mentioned that employers that can't attract and hire employees in the health industries, which is a growing industry here. Here, the school district has talked about building housing, and the hotel industry also is a very big employer. So there's the possibilities of other resources. And frankly, there's no resources for a park that I know of. Well, I'm not aware of them.
Yeah, of course. Let's get Mitchell. Can you give his mic back? And then.
Well, one of the main things that Airport to Park, one of our major achievements, actually, probably we know about it, is that we got the city council when they started this conversion process to put in the documents that hire the consultant, that whatever plan they came up with out of this process would be financeable and buildable. It would not be a pie in the sky type, Tonga Park plus whatever, $7 million an acre. But with the understanding that parks are built over time. And in this next go-round, we understand they will start talking about financing. They have a financing consultants. And so we should just wait and see what they talk about. But one thing I will say is nobody thought that we could build the Annenberg Beach Center, and it's called the Annenberg Beach or whatever it's called. It has the name Annenberg on it. Nobody thought that the Broad Stage could get an endowment. Broads came in. I mean, there's a lot of possibilities for philanthropy. There's, just as the housing, you talk about bonds, there could be a Parks bond. Parks bond's probably very popular in Santa Monica. So there's Proposition 4 money for doing the water stuff. There's a lot of possibilities for money, but I can't tell you right now how we're financing the park. Oh, yes. Oh, but the one thing we do know is the city right now makes $20 million a year gross from leasing offices at the airport. That money's going to go up because they've spent airport money to rehab 3200 Airport and some other buildings there. So that money is going to come online. It's not net 20 million, but it's a lot of money, and that can be used for maintenance and or revenue bonds. So there's a lot of possibilities. But anyway, I'm not telling you we have it financed. I'm just telling you that this park will not die because of lack of money.
Okay, so now we're going to go here, and then Mitchell, you'll be next. But it's an order. They're doing an order.
All right, so first of all, I just want to thank everybody who's been sharing some really great ideas. And I empathize with all of the sides of this conversation. I mean, housing is a crisis, there's no doubt about it, and a lot has to be done at a local level. There's the other issue is the fact that here we are the day after Earth Day, and one of the things that we realize is that the life systems of our planet are being completely consumed. And the pain of realizing what our next generations are inheriting, it's really heartbreaking, because I'm a documentary filmmaker, and I've been talking with people all around the board in terms of like what's happening to climate change, what's happening at the level of the Amazon forests and all of the forests all around the world And one of the things that is very, very clear is that the old adage of think globally and act locally is the only thing that we can do. And one of the reasons why I think Santa Monica is such an extraordinary city, and one of the reasons why I actually moved out here, is because there's a tremendous commitment and understanding about sustainability and about the need to make sure that our life systems, at least at our local level, are protected. And Santa Monica, as far as I'm concerned, I mean, granted, I'm kind of spoiled because I was born and raised in Rio de Janeiro. So we are kind of like surrounded by a rainforest. But still, having lived in a lot of different cities, I have to say, I hate to say it, but Santa Monica feels pretty gray to me. And when you look at the beach, yeah, the beach is absolutely extraordinary, but it does not have the greenery and the chaparral and the ecosystem and the species, the keystone species, and all of the herbs. And I mean, the Tongva people can tell us all about it. There's a tremendous amount of ecosystem that's been trumped by concrete in our city. And it does not have to be our future, because we've been given 200 acres of land where we can start regenerating our city. In addition to doing what people say, tree people, the organizations say, when you plant trees, it's like putting, what is it called, needles. Just like when you do acupuncture on a body, it's putting needles that are healing throughout the city. Imagine doing this at the park. It would be extraordinary. So what I like to say is that, yes, let's have housing, but let's think about putting concrete over concrete, and not concrete over a beach or concrete over the ocean, or concrete over the vision of an ecological, stunning park that not only can bring our ecosystem back in Santa Monica and help all of the climate change and locally be able to help the ecosystem around our world, but also it brings us back to anchoring ourselves as a species and realizing that we belong to something so much bigger than ourselves. Allowing our children to let go of their digital devices, even if it's for 10 minutes a day, and be able to turn a rock and realize that they're not alone in the universe.
Did you want to ask a... Sorry to interrupt, but...
I'm sorry. I just wanted to share something that I think is absolutely critical. So sorry for taking too much time. Thank you so much for your time.
Okay, it's Mitchell's up next.
Boy, what a great speech. Yeah. Hey, listen, don't forget the birds and the bees that'll come down there, and the animals, the raccoons, you know. And
okay.
And wait, I'm talking.
Ahead.
Okay.
Yeah.
I got okay. And where you can't see from one end to the other, with trees and mounds, you know, and it's good mental health. It'll be hopefully a regional park with state assistance to finance it. As I asked Ted Lieu, but he didn't get around to answering it. Maybe Senator Ben Allen can help out. Now, getting to this issue of housing, it's a plural. How much housing are we talking about? I mean, if you go with housing, it's unlimited, isn't it? And when you have unlimited housing, you know what we've got. We've got density. We got people stepping on each other's heels. Is this what this is the change of the community? With our city council is going for it. They can opt out of it, but they're into it. Because we keep getting these, I need housing, okay. And the excuse for housing is the teachers and the workers. Well, I might suggest, I think that's legitimate, but I think a better suited area that, other than taking over this airport land, is over by these the Santa Monica Civic Auditorium by the county building, that parking lot. They put the train to us. The train is right there. If people want to come to the county building, that's the objective. Get people out of their cars and taking mass transit. It's all around the parking lot area, and that parking lot area can be suited for the housing for the city employees, whatever, anybody that's associated with the city, the workers. This is the ploy for housing, for subsidized housing. Thank you very much.
Did anyone want to respond to it, or now we can just? Yeah. Okay. Well, let's go back. Go ahead, and let's get a microphone over.
I can be loud enough.
Well, we need you to be loud enough for Zoom, and you can't do that without a microphone.
I have a question. You mentioned about SCAG's housing element, and we had 8,000 were meant to build, and you expect there to be more. Is that just expanding that 8,000, or is that an increase on the 8,000 that we were supposed to build?
So whatever we fail to build for this current cycle, which ends in 2029, will roll over, and then there'll be a reevaluation of the housing need of Santa Monica, and so there's several different variables that go into that. And so what is the vacancy rate of housing? What is the overcrowding rate of housing? What is the amount of super commuters coming into Santa Monica? And I mean, to be frank, I think the allocation that we got for the sixth cycle really was the political compromise position, the floor of what we should build. Because, as I said up there, like I used to be one of those super commuters. I've worked with a lot of people like that. There's over 70,000 people who commute into the city every day, right? That's just how stark the housing jobs imbalance is of the city. So we've got a long way to go in terms of building housing.
So that 9,000 can become 11 or 12,000.
It could be big. If I were to bet, I would bet that it would be bigger than what we got for the sixth cycle. Probably be at least 10,000.
Thank you.
Okay, I didn't see Mike's hand up. I think he probably. I'm going to come to you. I know that Mike is going to respond to this part of the conversation, but I'm going to come to you next. Okay.
So the first thing people need to understand is we were not assigned 9,000 housing units. We were assigned something like 2,750 market rate units and 6,600 and something below market rate units. So I think it's important that anybody listening to this understand that it's not any housing that needs to be built. Given in the past two RENA cycles, we've always made our market rate housing. In fact, we crushed it last time, and hopefully, if Trump doesn't keep interest rates up there crazy and some other things change, we'll actually make it here too. But we're anywhere in the state of California, and including here, are we going to be able to make the below market rate housing. Now, we all face a choice in this city. Some of us, I first lived in Pacific Palisades, which is an economically gated community. I then moved to Brentwood, which is an economically gated community. And then I moved to Santa Monica, which is an economically diverse community. I lived north of Montana in a house that was ridiculously expensive when I bought it and is now even more incredibly ridiculously expensive. But 5 blocks from my house, and some people literally north of Montana across the street, is affordable housing in the city. And so I think we all have to ask ourselves, do we want to live in a city that's economically gated, because that's where Santa Monica is going, unless we intervene, because our rent control housing no longer is affordable to anybody in the lower income, even moderate income, and it continues to go up. Now, if we really want to do that, we're going to have to find resources, and one of the resources we're going to have to use is public land. We're doing that right now, and if we want to continue to have a community as we grow and as we lose more and more of our long-term rent control tenants who are lower income and are replaced by higher incomes in an economically non-gated community, we're going to have to devote some of our other public land to that. And I personally think that that can include a portion of the airport. half would not be what I personally would support, but we should be doing that there. And we're not going to, it's not the equivalent of some other land somewhere else because the cost of land in Santa Monica is expensive. So I think that's important. I don't know if David Pettit's still here. I mean, if I'm wrong about what the RENA numbers are, feel free to correct me, but I'm not. And David Pettit, who tells us that we can't make sure that we get the kind of housing we want there, is also, he's going to have to explain to me why at 4th Street, you know, we were able to do an RFP, and at 14th Street we were able to do an RFP, why we can't do an RFP at the airport. So I think that there's a lot of interesting conversation tonight, but I think everybody needs to understand that there's a lot more detail and information that needs to be delved into to do this, but we do face a fundamental choice about where the future of Santa Monica is going and what kind of community we want to live in. And people can make that choice. There are people who like to live in Beverly Hills and the Pacific Palisades and Brentwood. I'm just not one of them.
So Ann and Craig, just for the interest of time, I'm going to go to people who haven't asked a question yet, and then you're next. So let's get Mike. If you can get the mic from Mike, and then you can start talking.
Sure. Hi, my name is Joe Patel. I'm one of the founders of the Great Park Coalition, and I live in Santa Monica. I'm a public interest attorney. Following up on Dave Pettit said, I share some of the concerns that he had and some of the issues that he presented to the Cloverfield Commons folks, which is with 500 plus units going into the Gelson's parking lot, hundreds of others going up in the communities, they're proposing 3,000 units in a very small portion of the city, which is essentially landlocked away from transportation modes. Anybody who lives in Sunset Park knows that the population is about 7,500. Putting 3,000 new units would more than double the population of Sunset Park. And what concerned me is in the mission statement by Cloverfield Commons, they thought that that was a really good idea. In fact, if you look at the last page of the mission statement, they claim if we put all of the housing at Sunset Park, we don't have to have it in other parts of the city. And so I had asked them whether that is truly an equitable distribution of housing in the city when we know that this city has spent decades trying to establish transportation corridors in the middle of the city so we could have people getting on and off the train so that they could commute and get out of their cars. I would like to ask them, where is the vision now about building housing along transportation corridors, and why do you want to place it in one of the most transportation isolated portions of the city, doubling the population of one community while the rest of the city has absolutely no impact? That's my question.
Well, if you read our proposal, we call for transportation hubs so that there's shared vehicles, so down emphasizing individual vehicle use, bike paths, and also shuttle buses to downtown and to public transportation. I can't believe that you actually think that other parts of Santa Monica are going to want to absorb the affordable units that we are required to build, even the moderate rate. The fight over a project to even build 30 units is just like warfare. People don't want to live with people who don't have the same income level that they have. It's just, if you've ever been involved in one of these efforts to get buy-in, it's almost impossible. So it seems like it's a perfect place to have a mixed, it's not going to be all low income, but a mixed community. And we propose that the buildings be built along the same scale as Sunset Park and historic 1940s designs, not large, huge apartment, units, but modest places like Sunset Park is now. 2-3 bedroom homes, these are single family homes. What we're proposing is rentals or limited equity co-ops. But most people in Santa Monica never even go to the airport. They don't even know what the land, how big that land is. I know my neighbors, and I know, anyway, I think that you're counterposing two things that are not in contradiction. A large 192-acre park that has no people around it at night and in the mornings is not going to be a place I'm going to want to be in. It's not going to be safe unless we have a police force, a park force, which is going to enforce safety in something this large. But if you have people living around it, you have people engaged and watching what's going on, which is one of the reasons that I know Central Park has been raised by some of the park advocates, but Central Park has millions of people living around it, and they know what's going on in Central Park, and that's one of the reasons it's a place that people utilize. So I don't know. I just don't think that humans and parks are contradictory. In fact, they're copacetic.
Well,
yeah.
Okay, I'd like to make a couple comments, partly with my history of being a houser. One of the things I want to point out is that back in 2012, 2014, I would say that the true housing movement for everybody in Santa Monica, housing at every income level, what consisted of Pam O'Connor, sitting back there, me, and Terry O'Day. There was no housing movement in Santa Monica 2012, 2014. Otherwise, they might have put up a ballot measure themselves. Let's preserve ownership of the airport so that we can build housing there. Or they might have said vote no on LC as well as vote no on D, and then that would have preserved it. But right now, and then nobody ever talked about Bergamot Station for housing. Nobody ever talked about 4th in Arizona. There was no movement for that. It's come up now, which is great. I love housing. I think this is what I've been working for the whole time. Not just, a lip service about certain kinds of housing so you don't actually get housing built. But to talk to Michael's point, Santa Monica, yeah, we had roughly 2/3 of our arena was, and by the way, we don't have to build the arena. We have to plan for it. We have to allow it. But 2/3 of that. But, the funny thing about it is Santa Monica is very proud that ever since Measure R passed in 1990, something like 35 to 40% of all the housing built in this city has been affordable. It's been a great achievement. It's not like we haven't done that. But the real reason I picked up the microphone again was that this idea about building to the scale of Sunset Park in this day and age in an urban environment is just bad housing policy. If you're talking about putting 3,000 units on 100 acres, something like that, that's about a little bit over 30 units per acre. Downtown Santa Monica is the amount of housing that's called for at 4th in Arizona, the amount of affordable housing, and at Bergamot is either 125 or 150 units per acre. Downtown Santa Monica in urban density, 125, 150. You could put 3,000 units on 25 acres. Now, I'm not saying to do that at the airport, but you certainly don't have to take up half of the airport to do it. And this idea that what really offends me, the first thing that Vivian has said tonight that offends me about this thing, is the idea that we shouldn't have a park because we're afraid of homeless people or we're afraid of violence. You did say that. You said the park will not be safe unless you more or less said normal people are living next to it.
I think she said that she would be afraid to go there at night if there wasn't housing.
Where people living by.
Yeah.
Well, you know something? That's exactly the argument that the aviation argument will make. They will say, don't build that park. It's going to be full of homeless people. It's going to be full of muggers. It's all that kind of stuff that is so anti-urban. It's the wrong way to approach parks, and it's the wrong way to approach housing. Sorry.
He said the parks were filled with poor people because there's not housing.
Yeah, look. Homelessness is the shame of our civilization. There's no question about it. But it's no reason not to build a park.
Okay. So I think we need to get close to wrapping up. Do you want to ask one more question, Jonah?
Yeah, I mean, I guess, my name's Jonah Breslau. I'm with Unite Here Local 11. Just briefly, our union, we support Cloverfield Commons. We support that vision. I don't think, just to respond to a question that was posed earlier, I don't think anyone in Cloverfield Commons thinks that we should only build affordable housing at the park. And I think Many of us have fought for years to support affordable housing in many other sites in the city, and we believe we need affordable housing there too. I used to live in Santa Monica. Actually, at the time I, canvassed for Mr. Gruber, I shared a bedroom with someone else. There were 6 of us in a 3-bedroom apartment. We were violating our lease. We kept the blinds closed all the time so that the managers didn't evict us. I couldn't afford to stay in Santa Monica. I moved out of Santa Monica. I've moved further and further from Santa Monica over the years. I guess my question to the parks folks is, I think it's beautiful. Of course we support the parks, but what would you say to our members who work in Santa Monica, who make Santa Monica's economy thrive, who live next to, in many cases, the most affordable place that's close by is next to a much larger, much more polluting airport near LAX? And what would you say to those folks about why it's so important to use all of this land for housing rather than building affordable housing for working people who make Santa Monica possible, as well as in other locations? What would you say to them? And what would you say to me, like, I can't afford to live here anymore, about like why it's so essential that every part of the airport be used for a park? Rather than allow some amount of affordable housing?
Well, let me just say something. If you look at the, if you look at the FAQ for Great Park Coalition about our housing thing, and I'll be honest here, we talk about there's basically 160 acres at the park that can be developed as a park, at the airport that can be developed as a park. The rest of it is buildings that aren't going to go anywhere, already developed areas or whatever. We're waiting to see what staff comes up with to say about that land, to see what to do about it, to support, maybe that's, to be somehow used to support the financing of the park. But we know that there's acreage there that's not going to be part of the park. But we feel that every square foot that could be park should be park, because the people who live in the affordable housing you're talking about, they need the picnic tables. They need the barbecues. Their kids need the sports fields. Now, if there's 30 acres around there, now some of it is along Airport Avenue, is not going to be good for housing because it's very isolated unless Santa Monica College built dorms there. That's probably not a bad idea. Now look, I'm not talking for, I just want to make it clear, I'm not talking about for A2P right now. I'm not talking about for the Great Parks Coalition. I'm just speculating, because we don't have positions on these issues. So don't attribute to me don't attribute what I'm saying to them. This is just, when you look at the map, this is what you see. Airport Avenue is not a good place for your affordable housing. It's not a good place for market rate housing. It could be a good place for dormitories. I don't know, they want to put some dormitories on the Lieu campus. College students take up housing in this town. We all know that. A lot of them from out of the country. Then there's maybe some of that area is up next to the business park. The business park wants to build housing. Maybe something can be worked out with them. But to take up 95 acres of this, most of which would need sewers and streets and all that kind of stuff that costs tons of money, and say that that's going to be semi-suburban housing, it doesn't, from a housing point of view, it doesn't make any sense. And that's me speaking as a houser, not me speaking for Airport to Park or the Great Park Coalition.
I would just want to respond to your question. It is a good question.
Frank, you want to?
To respond to your question, and I have kids who are about your age, maybe a little bit younger, and they're going to face the same challenges that you all are facing now. And I would suggest that the issue that you're talking about is the same issue of income inequality that this entire country is facing. It's the same whether you're in parts of Manhattan or other parts of major cities. But with specifically to respect to your question, where would you put the housing? To go back to what David Pettit said, you could put it downtown. You could put it along the transportation corridors. I remember sitting at Brewworks at a Santa Monica Forward function, speaking to a pro-housing person, and we sat there and we looked at the different locations right in front of us, right along the rail line, underutilized plot, underutilized building. You could put a tremendous amount of housing along the locations that this city over many decades conscientiously planned it to be. Build it along Pico Boulevard. You could build it along parts of Ocean Park Boulevard. You can build it south of the 10 freeway on Lincoln. You can build it on Colorado. You can build it on Broadway. All of those were designed as major transportation hubs. That's where the housing was intended to be, so we could get out of our cars and walk. That's where I would suggest. Once that is all filled, come back and let's talk about something else.
Is that the Liberty City element that you're talking about, like the airport, or are you comparing like to like?
Well, Bergamot. Sure. Sure.
Okay, I just want to say one thing.
No, I'd like to respond to his comment.
Okay, okay.
In
Just that if you look at the
20 goals through the state of California, we have
Let's get a mic on Vivian.
In order to meet the requirements from the state of California, we have to do both. We have to develop in the areas that you see are along the corridors that are potentially for housing, and we have to do the airport. The numbers are huge, what our responsibility is. And if we don't meet those and we don't plan for that, the state is going to impose it on us. And you know, I think we need to realize we don't have a lot of choice, really. And this is, yeah. Do you want to say something?
I'll add just one more kind of dimension to the RENA analysis. So one of the reasons why the state of California did not certify Santa Monica initially was because Santa Monica failed to show in its plan that it would affirmatively further fair housing. So part of what RENA is trying to accomplish is to sort of address the previous injustices that have happened, right? And so if we don't touch, if we don't build housing in areas that have not traditionally, provided or built enough new housing over the last 50, 60, 70 years, then we're not affirmatively furthering our fair housing goals. And that was something that the previous council explicitly did, which was, previous councilmember Glean Davis had a proposal to allow moderate income affordable housing citywide, a citywide housing affordable overlay. And that was voted down, by that previous council. And so those requirements are still going to be, in existence. And so the proposal here is to only build a great park is to build a great park in what is objectively one of the most exclusionary areas of the city. And I don't really think that aligns with my personal value. Like I want the great park, but I don't think we're following our values or affirmatively further for housing if we don't plan for more housing in every neighborhood within the city.
Okay, I appreciate the animated discussion, but it's very late for our meeting, so we're going to wrap it up. But thanks, thank you. Well, let's thank the guest speakers. I really appreciate these guys. And I mean, I know, speaking for myself, I've learned a lot about this. I really appreciated points made by everybody tonight, and we've got a lot more to discuss about it. So if you're interested in continuing the conversation, it's not the end. We're just getting started. Please sign up. We're going to have the link. It'll be on our website. It'll be on our email blast, social media, to join this airport committee. We'll start meeting on Zoom. We'll talk about it more. Thank you. And the next membership meeting is May 21st. Right here, we'll have Betty Yee and Tony Thurmond, who are both running for governor. Thanks so much. Have a great night. Have a great month.
Hi, everybody. Night, everybody.